Good morning, everyone. We're going to call a meeting of the Carson City Board of Supervisors, the Carson City Liquor and Entertainment Board, and the Carson City Redevelopment Authority to order. Today is Thursday, May 7th. It is 8:30 a.m. We're in the Community Center at the Sierra Room at 851 East William Street, Carson City. Sue, can we have a roll call, please, for the record?
Good morning. Supervisor Boud, Supervisor Bonkowski, Supervisor Bagwell. Here. Supervisor Shirk. Here. Mayor Kroll.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Sue. Could we call our good friend Pat Propster of the Calvary Chapel Church to get us started on the right foot? Pat, it's always good to see you. You always have such good wisdom to start us off, so give us a good one.
It was, yeah, the fire department here, yeah. Reverend John Wesley a long time ago said that he got up in the morning and he had so much to do. He said, I must spend an extra hour in prayer. I mean, so prayer is powerful, And we're looking at 39 agenda items. That's the exact number of the Old Testament, so you guys are going to be here for a while. So, you know, there's 39 books in the Old Testament, so what I want to encourage each one of us today is that, therefore, the elect of God, holy and beloved, put on tender mercies, loving kindness, humility, meekness, long-suffering, bearing with one another, forgiving one another. If anyone has a complaint against another, even as Christ has forgiven you, you must forgive and do so also. Above all things, put on love, which is the perfect bond of peace. And let the peace of Christ, the peace of God, rule in your hearts, which you were called as one body to be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, putting on wisdom, admonishing one another with psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, singing with grace within your hearts to the Lord. And whatever you do, whether in word or in deed, do all in the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. Lord, these are encouraging words to us this morning about how we should treat one another. And with such a packed agenda this morning, Lord, things can get heated, things can get riled and go back and forth. But Lord, there's 39 agenda items that have to be gone through today. So Lord, we ask you that there would be tender mercies and lovingness and kindness and humility and working together and Lord, putting on that perfect bond of peace, the bonds of love. Lord, I ask you for wisdom to fall upon this room, discernment to fall upon this room, clarity, Lord, as decisions are being made, as fiscal impact is looked at, as licenses are handed out and granted to citizens that are wanting to be thriving businessmen and women in our community. Lord, give this room wisdom to lead and guide. Lord, I thank you for the uniforms that are in this room, the first responders. Lord, we pray for them, pray for the protection over the city, Lord, and all of the officials from the top to the bottom. In the precious and mighty name of Jesus we pray. Amen and amen. Is today at 11 o'clock, yes. Yeah. We were just over at the legislature. We started out the morning in room 3100. We've been there since 7 o'clock, so we started prayer there. From you? Yeah. And we do miss you there, but she does represent well. Thank you, Mayor. Yeah. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, folks. Have a great and blessed day.
By the time we get done with the agenda, we'll be on the New Testament. Right. Okay. Let's see. Where am I? We're on public comment, item number 5. We have public comment at the beginning and at the end of each board. And generally, it's the practice of the folks up here to have public comment as we go through the agenda items where it's possible, where it's appropriate, and it generally is appropriate. So, anybody have anything that they want to add under public comment? I don't see any, so we'll just keep going here then. Okay, let's take up the item of the item 6, approval of the minutes. March 5th, 2015.
I move to approve the minutes of March 5th, 2015 as presented.
Second.
There's a motion and a second on the motion discussion. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried unanimous. Take up March 19th, 2015.
I move to approve the minutes of March 19th, 2015 as presented.
Second.
Motion, a couple seconds on the motion discussion. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried unanimous. It's nice to have Supervisor Bonkowski back from Africa. Glad he's here in one piece.
Happy to be back.
Happy to be back, he is. All right. On the agenda, we have a consent agenda. Supervisor Shirk has asked that most, if not all, of the consent agenda items be pulled for individual comment. So we're going to just take up the agenda. Without a consent agenda, they'll be heard. Those items will be heard.
Item 18.
On 18. And with that in mind, anybody have any additional changes to the agenda? Not then, unless there's an objection, we will adopt the agenda as published and as I just described. Okay, could I have Chief Shreehans, where are you? How do you want to do this? I'm going to come up there. Is that all right? I'm going to come up there. Working? Yeah. Okay. This is a proclamation for Nevada Wildfire Awareness Month, May 2015. Whereas wildfire significantly impacts Nevada's environmental, economic, and social well-being, and whereas residents of Nevada's fire-prone communities need to accept responsibility for living in high fire hazard areas, and whereas residents must be encouraged to move from the expectation of being protected from wildfire to the understanding that they must be prepared to survive wildfire. And whereas to do so, they will need to acquire the knowledge and skills to prepare their homes to survive wildfire and to take action before the wildfire occurs. And whereas residents that implement appropriate pre-fire activities improve the survivability of their homes and probably their own survivability. Now, therefore, I, Robert Kroll, Mayor of Carson City, do hereby proclaim the month of May 2015 as Nevada Wildfire Awareness Month, and this year's theme, quote, improve your odds, prepare for wildfire, as a means for education and a call for residents of Carson City to take action to reduce the wildfire threat to their homes and help their community move forward toward becoming a fire-adapted community. So on behalf of our community, we'd like to present this proclamation. Chief, we're going to give it to you, and then I want you folks to give a little pitch on what we're doing for Wildfire Awareness Month, so, and talk about it a little bit. All right? All right. Chief. Thanks, man.
Thank you. Actually, I'm going to give it to Dave Rube, and then we'll pass it through.
Like the mayor said, this is Nevada Wildfire Awareness Month. We had a couple events last weekend. We had an open house up by WNC Western Nevada College, and talked about Forest Service, all the partnerships that we have in doing defensible space. We also had a fuels treatment that was actually done up behind the city manager's house up in Lakeview. We did a walking tour of that with our forester and some folks from the community. It showed them how when we do fuels treatment, it's not a clear cut. It actually enhances the forest health. We'd like to present a proclamation. This is Ed Smith and Joanne Skelly from the UNR Cooperative Extension. They work with the Living with Fire program that's supported by the Cooperative Extension. And they support us with a wealth of educational material and expertise on the forest ecology.
Thank you. Pretty good. Ed? Joanne?
All right, Ed Smith, University of Nevada Cooperative Extension. Together with Joanne Skelly and Sonia Sester, we coordinate Nevada's Living with Fire program, which teaches Nevadans how to live more safely in fire-prone areas. Wildfire Awareness Month, there are activities going on all over the state. Last year, there was 165 different events around Nevada to improve awareness of the wildfire threat and to promote action. In addition to the events that Dave mentioned, a couple of other things in the area. Last Saturday, we did a workshop with the Franktown Road homeowners on wildfire threat reduction. Then this Saturday is a wildfire awareness fun run, half marathon, 5K, sponsored by Nevada BLM. That'll be held at Washoe State Park. Gosh, we've got like 130 runners signed up for it. Any rate, and as the mayor had said, our theme this year is to improve your odds, prepare for wildfire. That is the key to living more safely in high fire hazard areas.
And this year we got probably, with the drought hitting, you know, that's scary stuff, so we need to all be aware of it.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mayor. I was in a briefing with the governor's fire season meeting, and they're predicting by this summer to have extensive area of the western states having the above normal potential for significant wildfire behavior. And the concern is, with such a huge area, there's a potential for multiple large fires in other states. And when we have large fires here in Nevada, we rely heavily on California. Well, this year, the concern is those resources are going to be stretched too thin, and we may not get help.
Very good. I'm going to go back up here, but I think they may have some questions, if so. But here, hang on to this, and when you're done, put it right, or give it back to the city manager.
Okay. Any questions?
Thank you very much. How you doing anyway? Good. All right. We'll now recess of the Board of Supervisors, and we'll take up item number 11, and let the record show that we have all the Board of Supervisors here and the sheriff, so there is unanimous participation on the Liquor and Entertainment Board. And I think with that, we don't need to do a roll call. We're on public comment on the liquor issues. We'll have public comment now throughout. I don't see any. Okay, then let's take up item 13, the minutes of February 5th, 2015. Everybody had a chance to look at those?
I move to approve the minutes of the Carson City Liquor and Entertainment Board for February 5th, 2015 as presented. Or
Second.
February 5th, 2015.
Motion by Supervisor Bankowski, second by Supervisor Abad on the motion. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried. Unanimous. March 5th, minutes of March 5th, 2015. Supervisor Bankowski, go.
I move to approve the minutes of March 5th, 2015 as presented.
Second.
There's a motion and a second on the motion. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried. Unanimous. On March 19th minutes, 2015.
I move to approve the minutes of March 19th, 2015 as presented.
Second.
A motion and a second on the motion. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Carried. Unanimous. Let's take up item 14, Community Development Business License. This is for possible action to approve Alan George as secondary liquor manager for High Sierra Company Plus DBA Remedies. Lena, you're going to take us through this?
This item is for possible action to approve Alan George as a secondary liquor manager for High Sierra Company Plus LLC, doing business as Remedies, liquor license number 15-29092, located at 306 East William Street. High Sierra Company is adding Alan on as a secondary manager, and staff is recommending approval.
Good morning, Alan.
Good morning.
For the record, it's Alan George. Alan George,
Yes,
correct?
yes.
All right. You're the son of Charlie?
Yes, yes.
Very good. I've known him for a long time.
Oh.
Been around, okay. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're doing, why you want to do it, and if you had any difficulties out there at Remedies? I'd like to hear from the sheriff if we've got difficulties out there.
I don't think so. Since it's been open, Remedies, it's been fairly quiet for,
I see the sheriff with a strained look on his face. He's saying, wait a minute.
Actually, if I recall back, when Remedies opened from the old bar, there was some caution statements made by Mr. McKenna, and Remedies actually really did turn that place around, and I'm very, very proud of the folks that have been there.
All right.
thank you.
Any underage drinking violations? Okay. Okay, board members? Supervisor Bankowski.
I just have a question for staff. It doesn't look like the application was filled out completely. Items 14 through 18, specifically 18. I'm just wondering if that's a requirement that these need to be filled out completely, especially that section.
18 wouldn't apply to him. The application was filled out the way it is because he's just strictly being added on as an additional liquor manager. as far as 14 and all of that, none of that has changed. But if, I can follow through on that if you would like.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions to the board? Supervisor Abad, motion's in order.
I move to approve Alan George as a secondary liquor manager for High Sierra Company Plus LLC DBA Remedies, liquor license number 15-29092, located at 306 East William Street.
Motion by Supervisor Abad, second by Supervisor Shirk on the motion. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried unanimous. Thanks, Alan.
Thank you.
Keep things smooth out there, please. All right. All right, let's take up Mohammed Ahmed. This is 14B. Lena, you want to take us through?
This item is for possible action to approve Mohammed S. Ahmad as the liquor manager for Eagle Gas, liquor license number 15-30432, located at 1360 South Carson Street. Mr. Ahmad is applying for a packaged liquor license, and he's taking over from the previous person that was running the store. Staff is recommending approval.
Okay, help me understand. You've been operating that. I know that there's a 90-day grace period when you retake over something.
Yes.
Have you been operating without a license at all?
No, sir. They're still in here, but they're trying to negotiate with me, the previous one.
Click the mic there.
There you go. Okay.
Good.
So they're still involved with me, but they want to take over the business again because I sold them. I take it back because they owe me money, and but I decided I'm going to change to my name these things.
Okay, other board comments? Public comment? Comment, go.
I just want to be clear, and Kenny, maybe you can answer this. On the last page of the documentation, it says that Carson City Municipal Code 4.13.120 is allowed up to 90 days to operate under the seller's liquor license, but that you don't have a written agreement with regards to that? And we're beyond that. That's why I'm asking the question.
When somebody's taken over a liquor license or buying a business from somebody, there is the option of them coming up with a management agreement. That management, was not presented to us. I'm not sure that they even have one in place. Mr. Ahmad was out of the country for, 30 days that you were, more than that. And that's why there's the span of time that this has been going on, because he was out of the country.
Just to follow up on Karen's question, though, is the previous owner's liquor license still valid?
The previous owner's liquor license is current. It is paid through the end of June, yes.
So there's no issues with it being operated under that license, even though they're no longer the owner of the business?
Sometimes the situations that we run into, sometimes we do have a lapse of time in between getting this owner and the new owner to take place. I understand that this situation has gone longer than normally it would. We normally don't run into this period of time expanse. It's normally we're able to get it through and get it done. But with him being out of the country, that's why it's been this way. But their liquor license is current, the previous owners, yes. Did I answer your question?
I have a question for Mr. Ahmad. Is it your intention then to sell the business again back to the previous owners?
No.
So you're going to retain ownership, or will you put it on the market and try to sell it to somebody else?
I'm gonna be retained first, and maybe then later on try to sell that.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, board? Motion's in order.
I move to approve Mohammed S. Ahmad as the liquor manager for Eagle Gas, liquor license number 15-30432, located at 1360 South Carson Street.
Motion by Supervisor Abad, second by Supervisor Shirk on the motion. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried. Let's take up item 14C. This is a companion application with respect to Eagle Gas License 15-30447, located at 2152 North Carson Street. This is the same type of events that we just discussed, correct?
Yes,
Anything
sir.
you need to add to this one? Staff recommendation is approval?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Ahmad, do you want to make any statements? Good, okay. All right, motion's in order.
The remediation of the fuel contamination at this site, has that been resolved to the state's satisfaction? I know that there was some issues with who was going to be ultimately responsible for that.
Well, there is a state insurance for that, and I applied twice, but we cannot find the source of leak. But they start working on it, so hopefully by the end of this quarter, they're gonna finish that cleanup, so then we can sit down and talk about that, how we're gonna pay it. But I do have the insurance over there by the state of Nevada.
And then are you going to replace the fuel tanks? Are they going to
They
go
already
back in?
been replaced.
Okay, so the old ones were removed, but there's new tanks in there? And
No.
Okay, so there's no tanks now?
There's no tanks, right?
So my question is, are you going to put more tanks in and return to selling fuel?
That's possibility, but let's finish this cleanup first, and I'm gonna sit down with people over there, and then we go from there.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Motion? Supervisor Avon.
I move to approve Mohammed S. Ahmad as the liquor manager for Eagle Gas liquor license number 15-30447, located at 2152 North Carson Street.
Nay. Who voted nay?
No.
No. On both of them?
No, just this one.
No, on the one with the fuel.
Okay, on the fuel, okay.
Stop.
I apologize, guys, I'm just trying to live by that propster. I mean, I don't want to be here. Okay. All right, 2 noes. All right, let's take up item 14D. Lena?
This item is for possible action to approve Anastasia Carey as the liquor manager for the Thick Slice Pizza Company LLC, liquor license number 15-30584, located at 2010 East William Street. She is applying for a dining room with beer and wine only, and staff is recommending approval.
Good morning, how are you?
Doing well, how are you?
Good, nice to see you.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're doing and what your business plan is? and-
Okay.
little-
Basically, my husband and I are the owners of a pizza restaurant. It's called the Thick Slice Pizza Company. It's right at 2010 East William Street, right up here at Plaza 50, where the Dunkin' Donuts is, right next to that new 99-cent store. And basically, it's a family restaurant, pizza, salads, sandwiches, and we'd like to apply today be approved rather, for the beer and wine liquor license. Because pizza and beer go hand in hand.
Particularly thick pizza.
Yes.
Okay, all right. What's the staff recommendation?
Staff's recommendation is approval.
Okay. Motion's in order. Go.
I move to approve Anastasia Carey as the liquor manager for the Thick Slice Pizza Company LLC, liquor license 15-30584, located at 2010 East William Street.
Second.
Motion and a second on the motion. Discussion. Hearing none. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thanks for investing in the community.
Thank you very much.
We'll be out to eat some thick slice.
Some Greek
Hope to see
pizza.
you.
Greek pizza, okay. All right. We'll now take up item 15. This is concluding public comment under the Liquor and Entertainment Board. Any public comment, concluding public comment? I don't see any, so we will then adjourn as the Liquor and Entertainment Board. We'll reconvene as the Board of Supervisors, and we'll take up the consent agenda items that were pulled. So we will now go to, where am I going to go here? Let's see.
The treasurer, it'd be item 9, TAC 1.
Yeah. Let me just get this. Okay, we're going to take up item 9-1A. Morning, Madam Treasurer, how you doing?
Good, thanks.
Okay, you guys want to tell us what's going on here?
We just have to, let me just 1 minute here. Which one was first? Was this the affidavit of the letters that we sent?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we just need to let you know that we sent out all the notices when they were due and how many came back and how many we were able to re-deliver and how many are just not deliverable at this point.
Okay, statutory requirement. Okay, Supervisor Bonkowski.
One quick question. Of the 9 letters that were determined to be undeliverable, what happens next? Because if they're not paying their taxes and we can't deliver the notice of delinquency to them, they're going to go on the tax lien roll. How do we contact these people to see if we can get the taxes before we have to sell their properties? What's the process?
There was a notice put in the paper last week, and it was also it's going to be put on our website today as well. I know for sure at least one person did show up yesterday, yeah.
So if we can't contact the remaining 8 people and we put a lien on their property, they're not going to be noticed because we don't have an address for them. Do we have the ability to then sell their property at a tax sale without ever notifying them?
Eventually, yeah.
Good morning. That answered one of my questions. The other one was there's 18 properties that have not paid, if I'm correct. Regarding the 18 that were returned, you had 18 notices returned. What is the next action on that?
Trying to track them down through different sources, looking for their addresses. But right now, we're just seeing what happens with the public notice being put out there on both the internet and in the newspaper.
And I know in my brief discussion with you, I also asked you, is Empire Golf Ranch current on their taxes?
No, they're not.
How far behind are they?
They paid the first installment last August, so they're delayed. They're late on the last 3.
Okay, I know the treasurer before you had a, I guess you could say a protocol that he followed for getting taxes done. Do you have that protocol?
It's the same.
It's the same?
We're just following the statutes, what we're allowed to do.
No, when he went out and worked with individuals on payments or whatever, he personally, will you be doing that as well?
We will. We had somebody come in the other day who owes the city, it'll be about $600,000. And he came in and spoke with Dave and Beth and me. Empire Ranch is actually protected, though. They declared bankruptcy. So there's not much we can do right at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Public? Anybody? Motion's in order. Supervisor Shirk, go.
I'm sorry. I have one additional question, if I may ask at this time. On the, or do I have to wait for the next one? On the prorated taxes for the veterans, if I could just ask that right now, or should I wait for the next one? I'll wait for the next one. Thank you.
Who wants to make a motion? Go ahead.
I move to accept the acknowledgement of affidavit of delinquent notice mailing for real property taxes.
Second.
Motion and a second on the motion. Discussion. Hearing and seeing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried. Okay, unanimous. Let's take up item 9.1B. This is partial removal and partial refund of taxes on for the 2014-2015 real property tax roll on parcels 10-531-23, 0-3-033-10, 2-672-16, 8-031-06, 8-093-05, due to a donation of veterans exemption to the Veterans Guest Home in the amount of $367,000.28. Okay, I want to read that in because I know, just set it up. Anything you want to add further to that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dave Dolly, Carson City Assessor. I believe that Mr. Shirk did have a question as far as the noticing of the exemption itself. I'm going to answer this question because the Assessor's Office does handle the exemption program for the veterans and the disabled veterans. What happens in this particular case is a veteran is entitled to take either a reduction of his taxes or a reduction of the governmental service tax off of the motor vehicle registration because he is a veteran and he served during a major conflict. Certain times those veterans will actually pay the taxes and actually donate that amount to the veteran's home. So once a year, the Treasurer's Office, we give a list to the Treasurer's Office, and the Treasurer's Office brings it to you to authorize the transfer of the exemption to the veteran's home itself. Now, the assessors and the DMV, what happens when we try to notify people of the exemption, it's a very hard exemption to get the word out to. We do publish it in paper once a year when it comes out with the publication of the tax roll. It's also on our website. The DMV is supposed to be talking to each person who registers their vehicle to find out if they are an exempt or if they are a veteran, and then they are to send them to the assessor's offices so that we can sign them up. The DMV website also does have the ability now that you can actually use this exemption or you can register your vehicle online. And so one of the steps is it asks if you are a veteran. And if you are, then you put the county and it gives you information on how and where to apply for the exemption. So we're up to suggestions on how to get the word out to the general public. We think it's a great program and we do encourage it.
That answered my question. Thank you.
I move to approve the partial removal and partial refund of taxes to the 2014-2015 real property tax roll in parcels number 10-531-23, number 3-033-10, number 2-672-16, number 8-031-06, number 8-093-05, due to the donation of veterans exemption to the Veterans Home in the amount of $367.28 from real property taxes.
Motion by Supervisor Abad, second by Supervisor Bonkowski on the motion. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried unanimous. Let's take up 9-2. This is to accept the report of the condition of each fund in the Treasury. Statements. Mr. Providenti.
Good morning, Mayor,
Standard
members of the
report. Tell us
board.
what's going on.
This is the normal report on the condition of the Treasury. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Public comment? No public comment. Board comments.
Yeah. Nick, I just had a follow-up question from the previous board meeting.
Okay.
Where it was discovered that the $77,000 in the residential construction tax in other words, somewhat alluded to, it must be returned to somebody. And I was just seeing if there's progress made on that, and what is our next step?
Well, I believe, from a finance perspective, we basically have that as a liability on the books. And I believe Roger, the Parks and Rec Director, I don't know if he has any information on that regarding Silver Oak.
For the record, Roger
Adriana, I
Mullendorf.
assume we're okay under the open meeting law if we step out of the strict confines of the report itself and talk about individual properties that are.
As long as it's
discussed.
under the broad umbrella of what we're talking about, but no deliberation or leading to a conclusion.
All right, go.
Okay, good. Excuse me, Roger Mullendorf, Parks and Recreation Director. There's approximately, I think, I think you said 77,000. I think it's actually a little bit less than that, maybe 74 or 72,000. That is still available for reimbursement to Silver Oak for improvements in their subdivision. We have not reimbursed that at this time until we receive proper documentation from Silver Oaks for the reimbursement, which requires invoices that detail what the improvements were. We've had contact with Silver Oak. We've had discussions with them. They're working towards that end.
Since it's been brought up, you've had discussion with them. So
We
they're in
have,
the
yes.
progress. That's all I needed to know. Thank you.
Further discussion from board members? Motion's in order. Supervisor Bonkowski.
I move to accept the report on the condition of each fund in the Treasury and the statements of receipts and expenditures through April 28, 2015 per NRS 251.030 and NRS 354.290.
Motion by Supervisor Bonkowski, second by Supervisor Bagwell on the motion. Discussion. Hearing and seeing none. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Carried unanimous. Let's take up 9-3, City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, as you know, the Convention and Visitors Bureau gets to nominate one member to the Cultural Commission. Their nominee is Mr. Stan Jones. Had I known that this item would have been pulled from the consent agenda, I would have had him here this morning. He's not. I recommend approval to you. If that is not adequate, we could probably roll this to the afternoon. I'll either get him here in person or get him on the phone.
Okay, well, this is, the CCVB is making this recommendation, okay? All right. We'll take public comment, and then we'll see where we go. Personally, I think it's okay to move forward on this if we see fit to do that. So, board members' comments or questions? Anybody?
I did have this pulled. Had I thought about it, I would have asked Nick to move it to the afternoon session where we're acknowledging Ded Block for some acknowledgments he's done. I think any individual within the community who's representing us and doing a volunteer job in this capacity deserves our recognition. That's why I had it pulled for public recognition. Thank you.
Motion's in order. Motion, Supervisor Abel.
I move to appoint Stan Jones as the representative of the CVB on the Carson City Cultural Commission to fill an unexpired term that ends in January of 2016.
Second.
Motion by Supervisor Abel. A couple seconds on the motion discussion. Hearing and seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Carried unanimous. Let's take up 9-4. Ms. Aker, you want to take us through this on the information item? Frontier Nursing University.
Good morning, Nikki Aker, Carson City Health and Human Services. So this is an informational item only, and we are entering into a clinical affiliation agreement with Frontier Nursing University. Frontier Nursing University is an online program that's highly recognized for nurse practitioners. So these are individuals that are already licensed as nurses, and they're going back to get additional education for nurse practitioner. And we have a couple of nurse practitioners in our clinics that are able to precept them. We also have an affiliation agreement with UNR's, the Orvis School of Nursing. So.
Very good. Board comments? Supervisor
Hey, Nikki.
Supervisor Shirk.
One question on item number 5 of the agreement. It says FNU agrees to request that student complete a criminal background check within 12 months of the student attending the agency clinical site. That doesn't make any sense to me. The background check should be completed before we allow them on our site.
Right, and so as a licensed nurse, we get a background check when we get our license, and then also when you're admitted into a school, then you get a background check. What this means is this is an additional background check that will be done. It's actually within 5 months or 12 months prior to them coming. So we will have a current background check 12 months before they come.
Can we revise the language so that that's clear, though? Because this says
I can definitely
after.
do that. Yeah, I can definitely do that.
Thank you.
Supervisor Shirk. Go.
I talked briefly about this same paragraph and sentence as well. I had trouble with it. And this is the reason we pulled these consent agenda items to discuss issues that we see.
Correct.
The other thing we did talk about was the 3-year term, and you said that's generally what we normally do. The other thing I was asking about was this agreement may be amended or renewed only in writing by signed parties. So it could be amended in any fashion. It could have wages, funding, it could have any aspect into it, and it could be amended by both parties. Is that a problem?
I don't see that as a problem. These types of agreements would never be amended where wages or anything are included in this.
We're sure, right?
I'm positive. I'm positive.
I think that covers everything. Item 13. Let me just check number 15. There's certificate of insurance. We have to provide them with one. That's number 15. Each party upon request of the other party, and you're requesting that, correct?
Yes. And we've already taken care of that.
Thank you.
And let me just clarify, so this one, the UNR agreement is brought for approval to the board because it's an interlocal agreement with another governmental institution, and this one was, I was advised to bring it as information only so you all knew what was happening in our clinic.
Very good. Public comment? It's informational only. Anything else? Thank you, Nikki. Go back and keep us healthy. All right, let's take up item number 19, Q&D, CMAR.
No. 9-5.
9-5, where am I here then?
Fuji Park.
Fuji Park, that's what I'm doing, Fuji Park.
Kim Belt, purchasing contracts, for the record. This action is to accept the work, staff is asking acceptance of the work completed, to accept the contract summary, and to release final payment in the amount of $8,105.40 to Coons Construction. It was a question about interest, and Rick Cooley's here to discuss that. Thank you.
Kim or Rick, my printout copies were illegible, so I don't know what the change orders were for.
Rick Cooley, construction manager. Change order 1 was for some additional base that we need to put in before the slab went down in order to get proper drainage that the building department wanted. It was a last minute deal during form inspections. And a second item was for some additional work when the work was done to bring the actually yard up, some additional base to bring the yard elevation up so they can use it for parking, and also to put some OSB board around the interior to prevent the sides from getting damaged.
Just a general question on change orders and contracts. So if we approve or work on change orders, those were original items that potentially were approved in the original contract? Or so alternatives and things that, or these things we found later and decided to do?
They weren't part of the original contract. It was once we got to a point to where we knew we didn't have a bunch of unknowns and that the contingency fund was available. The Parks Department asked that we add those additional changes to enhance the project.
So just for, in general, I'm not going to vote against this, but in general, for me, when we do contracts and put contingency dollars in there, they should be items that were part of the contract. And if it's a new scope add, and that's kind of what I'm getting to, is this a scope change, I think those should actually come back for discussion at the board versus if you found a rock and can't complete a project, that's what I think change orders are for. So it's just a discussion I think we need to have about the processes of change orders.
All right, we'll have that discussion later. All right,
Later.
Supervisor Shirk.
I disagree with that. I don't think that's feasible, what Lori just mentioned, how to do that. Change orders, when you're in the process of doing a job, you're not going to come back here for discussion. That's not going to happen. You're going to have to make decisions out in the field. They're hard decisions, but that's the way it happens. I will also say, I know copy machines aren't good, but these copies on the back of this are terrible to even understand what it's about, so I know you're aware of that. I came in, Kim, you weren't there, I talked to Nick. What I did mention was, in the letter dated, it says the work was completed as of January 16th, and it goes on to say that per NRS 338, applicable and interest must be paid to the contract regardless of the billing dates. So I was confused by that statement. I don't know if Nick explained that to you.
Supervisor Shirk, where's that language you're talking about or referring to the NRS?
On page 4, it says the work was satisfactorily completed as of January 16th, 2015. And then later when I read all of this, I forget where I read, NRS 338 is applicable and interest must be paid to the contract regardless of the billing dates.
You are correct with regards to the date, and in Public Works, what happens is once you all approve the project as complete, that's when that final interest payment is paid per the NRS. Okay. It's not cut. They're paid quarterly, and then when it comes to the finalization, once it gets approved by the board, then we cut the final check. You can't really calculate that amount until this action occurs. So that happens on all our projects. Does that answer your question?
It does. I was just looking at the date. It says it was done, all work was completed January 16th, and where we're at now billing-wise, it seems like a lapse between that and when you're coming and asking for final payment. That's all I was bringing up.
You're absolutely correct. This one was lost. We were doing a few projects with Coons at the time, and this one got lost in the shuffle. Both on their end and our end, we kind of just forgot about finalizing this project out, so.
Thank you very much.
Any other comments from the board? Public comment? Anybody? Motion's in order.
I move to accept the work as completed, to accept the contract summary as presented, and to approve the release of final payment in the amount of $8,105.40 for contract number 1314-134 titled Fuji Park Fairgrounds Maintenance Building to Coons Construction, LLC.
Motion by Supervisor Bankowski, second by Supervisor Abad on the motion. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried, unanimous. Kim, make sure that this copying stuff gets fixed. I mean, you got to take a look at this stuff before it comes up here, okay? Take a look before, because that's not correct. All right. All right. Let's now move to item 19. Disclosures in order.
NRS 281A.420 requires me to disclose a conflict of interest. The matter before the board affects my commitment in a private capacity as an owner of a business in Redevelopment District 1, which may benefit from the downtown streetscape project. However, the resulting benefit or detriment accruing to me is not greater than that accruing to any other business owner similarly situated. Therefore, I conclude that the independence of judgment of a reasonable person in my situation would not be materially affected by this private commitment, and because this is not a clear case of disqualifying conflict of interest, I will be voting on this matter. Thank you.
Any other disclosures? Don't hear any. Mr. Rotter, why don't you take it up? I think we see what's going on here. Go, tell us what's going on.
All right. We are here back to you with a contract for Construction Manager at Risk, or other words, CMAR. We told you we'd come back with this, and that's why we're here. We went out for RFP in accordance with NRS 338 that governs CMAR. Had 3 submittals: Granite, Sierra Nevada Construction, or S&C, and then Q&D. Reviewed, ranked all the proposals, did interviews about 3 weeks ago, selected Q&D, and bringing the contract forward to you today. One of the reasons we see CMAR as being a great opportunity is working with the businesses down there and minimizing those impacts, having a contractor on board early of how do you write a spec to make sure Carson Jewelry and Loan has proper access throughout the certain time periods of the day. Having them on board early is a good way to do that, and they're versed in these type of projects. So if there's any questions about the project or how we're going to use CMAR, I'm here. We've got Q&D here as well. If they're in the back there, if we have questions for them, I'm sure there's going to be a question about the $0 amount on this one. So Kim's here for contract questions. The one thing we would point out is the contract has a December 31st, 2016 expiration date. The proposed motion has a June 30th, so we would suggest just striking that and putting December 31st, 2016 in the motion.
Board comments or discussion? Supervisor Bankowski, go.
You know the question. $0 amount on this contract. I assume they're being compensated on another part of this project somewhere.
Correct. So in CMAR, typically you'd have an amount for pre-construction services, and then the negotiated guaranteed maximum price after would have an overhead and profit negotiated in it. And so rather than paying that as well as the pre-construction services, Q&D offered this to us as a service they normally would provide a private client. They're actually here. Jeff, you want to come up and answer that?
Yeah, so the $0 value is for the pre-construction services, which is design review, budget estimates,
we need to have your
public
name.
outreach on this project.
The name.
Oh,
We're on
sorry,
record there.
Jeff
I'm sorry.
Bean with Q&D Construction.
Right, okay.
So it's for, okay, here we go. For
I didn't mean to
pre-construction.
interrupt you there either. I mean, this is why it's awkward to do this stuff. So everybody always asks your name, you get into it, then you lose your train of thought. Go, Jeff, go ahead.
So the pre-construction services include preparing budget estimates at 3 or 4 stages along the way, doing design reviews and constructability reviews, and on this project, public outreach, and gaining feedback from the business owners in the impacted area. And for those services, we are not charging any fee. When it goes to the construction side, there will obviously be a construction contract price.
Further board comments? Supervisor Shirk.
So basically, how much money do you think it would cost you, or you got to have a rough idea of what this is going to cost you in the, I guess, the early stages, even before it's going to come up for bids? So there's a dollar amount you already put there. Do you have that idea of what that is?
Yeah, so the value, and we prepared there was a form to fill out as part of this process, and we put hours to 5 different people that we feel are the key personnel. That dollar value would come out around $50,000 to $60,000 is the value we would have in mind.
And through the process, you'll be looking at contracts and layout of the buildings themselves and the sewer lines and so forth, and making recommendations, correct? Hopefully that you'll be cost saving to Carson City. That's the ultimate goal. Is there any way, or will we have a recognition of how much money has actually been saved by this expense?
Yeah, so typically, or oftentimes in a CMAR, the owner will ask for either the owner or the contractor will keep a log of, we call them value engineering ideas that came out during the design process. And so at the end, there can be a report prepared or a document prepared that shows the savings associated with the process.
And at the end of the process, when everything's all final and everything, does this go out to bid, or is it the project's just awarded to you?
It is a negotiated process, so if we don't reach terms on a negotiation, then it would go out to hard bid.
Who's it negotiated with?
With the staff.
Does staff come back to us and ask for approval, or do they negotiate and accept the contract?
We will bring forward a guaranteed maximum price contract for you to review and approve.
Thank you.
So the question for me is, this is a zero value contract. So let's say, for instance, a CMAR maximum price contract cannot be negotiated. Is there then a methodology for reimbursement for this pre-construction work? So you know you're at risk if, I just want it on the record and clear that you're investing potentially $50,000 and you have no guarantee of a reimbursement or a CMAR actual contract.
Absolutely correct.
Okay, I'm just putting it out there that I don't want to see something come back if it
Won't
goes
happen.
awry. Okay, thank you.
Jim, you got no, go.
Sorry to labor on the point. If, through the process, when it's all final and done, and you present your logbook and how much you saved and everything, and it's negotiated with the city to a dollar amount, if it is not accepted, would that logbook of everything that's happened up to this point, up to the bidding process, be available to other contractors should they come in to bid the work?
So that VE list that's developed, value engineering, over the course of the project, the designer, Loomis, is in the same room talking about those things. So the benefit of having Q&D on board in those meetings and in those discussions is how do you build the sidewalks between Proctor and Telegraph on the west side and keeping access to those businesses? They're giving us those ideas, those concepts, those value engineering items. Loomis is incorporating those into the design. So if we get to the end and they've documented all these savings, that's the value that they've already provided. Then we'll take those documents that have been prepared and say, give us a guaranteed maximum price. If the contract goes through and everything is great and we have a negotiated price, we bring it to you for approval. If we can't come to terms, then we would put that same package that already has the value engineering items in it out to bid.
At what stage do you decide that the bid process between the contractor who's providing the service and the city should go out to bid? At what juncture is there a defining mechanism to say it should go out to bid? What determines it?
So from the very first budget estimate, we're tracking costs. And Loomis is saying, hey, we think it's going to cost this much. QND is saying we think it's going to cost this much. If we get to 60%, we're going to get a little bit closer. If we still can't come to an agreement and we need a third party, we'll get a third party in there, sometimes called an ICE, an independent cost estimator. And they'll be in the room as well to make sure that everybody's on the right track with cost. When we get to 90%, we can still bring them in as our representation or however we see fit. At that point in time, if the guaranteed maximum price is still not able to be negotiated and worked out, we'll make that call internally and then go one way or the other.
Is that process brought back to the board as you come through the different phases you just mentioned, those percentages? Do you come back and update us at any point, or is that just something out of the loop?
With this project, I believe we're coming forward with 30% design and estimate, and then 90%. I think 60 we're going to RTC and RAC, and then 90 we're coming back to the board with the cost estimate there. So after the 90% at the board here, we'll go away and either bring you a CMAR GMP or a bid opening contract.
And I apologize, I forget your first name, I'm sorry.
Jeff.
Jeff, and your company did the Kings Beach modification to the street?
Kings Beach and Kingsbury, yes.
I go up there a lot. That's a really nice project. I must compliment you. I drove through there a lot. It seemed to flow pretty good. I'm not really happy with the roundabouts, but it was a nice project, well done. I go up there quite a bit. I got family up there and friends, so thank you. And thank you for your patience on answering me, David. Thank you.
Other board comments, public comment? Anybody? Motion's in order.
I move to approve contract number 1415-145A pursuant to NRS 338.1685 through 338.16995 inclusive with QND Construction, Inc. to provide CMAR pre-construction services for the downtown streetscape project through December 31st, 2016 for a no-fee contract.
Motion by Supervisor Bronkowski, second by Supervisor About on the motion. Discussion. I don't see any. On the motion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried unanimous. And Jeff, I'd like to echo what Supervisor Shirk said, with one exception. The guy you got back there with you, I mean, that's kind of questionable. Okay.
Thank you, I agree.
All right, all right. All right. Inside baseball, all right. We ready? Andy, you gonna do this? Who's doing this? What are we doing here? This is the recommendations from the Utility Financial Oversight Committee.
Right, this is like being at the legislature now. Only you're more pleasant.
Oh, good. Well, and it doesn't, you know, yeah, it's pretty interesting. You and I have been in those chairs quite a bit, so go.
For the record.
Those chairs are nicer, that's right. We got to get some water up there, too. But.
Well, I will say, on behalf of senior citizens, Mr. Mayor, if you could speak up a little bit so we could hear you better.
I think probably, you know, my nasal tone is, I'll speak up as best as I can, and I apologize for having the crud.
No, I understand completely, and I had a birthday over the weekend. I'm officially a senior citizen now, so.
Really?
So,
Okay, all right, I'll speak up. Okay, go.
For the record, Andy Engelman, Chairman of the Utility Financial Oversight Committee. We met to go over the budget as it pertained to the sewer, water funds, et cetera. And the committee approved to recommend to you that that we approve the sewer fund. We also approved the water fund, but we did take note of the fact in both of those that we recognize that in the beginning you have to spend a lot of money on capital equipment. But we feel that we need to watch carefully to be sure that the reserve fund is at the 100% after 5 years and that it continues to be funded fully after that. On the stormwater fund, as Bruce Scott said, nobody pays attention to this until there's a flood. And as it happens, we really haven't funded it fully over the last couple of years, and it also is not on the 5-year plan that the other funds are on. So at some point in time, we talk about a balance. We know that what needs to be done, but the money isn't always there. So at some point in time, you may have to take a look at raising that fee a little bit to supplement the stormwater fund. And then we had supplementation of domestic water. As you know, we don't have enough effluent for those areas that use the effluent, the golf courses, the prison farm, etc. So staff suggested that they put a line item in our sewer fund to use potable water to supplement the water for the golf courses, etc. And that line item will be about $100,000. We spent approximately $71,000 to $80,000 last year on supplementing the effluent. And the question came up as to whether or not that line item should then be repaid by the water fund or by the users. And the committee, in its wisdom, felt that this was something that only you could decide. And so we have no recommendation as far as the payback is concerned. But we do agree with the line item in the budget.
And you're okay with $100,000?
Yes, I think that
I mean, your committee was. I didn't mean to say it like that. The committee was okay with the
Yes,
with the
yes.
charge of $100,000?
Yes,
Okay.
with the drought being, we felt it might go up a little bit over what it was last year, and so we felt $100,000 should be adequate.
I think I speak for all of us here. Please convey our thanks to the Utility Oversight Committee for its work and diligence in moving these things forward. I know we're going to have some other things this afternoon that are not very controversial, so.
I'll be back.
Well, you might want to skip that one, but that's okay. I'm kidding.
No,
I'm kidding. But
I
no,
will be here.
In all sincerity, thanks for, please convey our thanks to your committee there. It seems to be working fine, and I'll ask the staff here if you've got any follow-up questions or anything. It looks like it's pretty well taken care of here. All right, board comments. Anybody? Public comments? I don't see any. Okay, motion's in order.
I move to accept the report of the Utility Financial Oversight Committee from their March 24th, 2015 meeting.
Second.
Motion by Supervisor About, second by Supervisor Bankowski on the motion. On the motion, discussion. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried, unanimous. Thank you. All right. Sure. And Bonnie, if you can, if I raise your hand if I start to mumble or, okay? Good. All right. All right. We're going to be in recess. Let's take 10, and we've been moving pretty good here, so we'll be in recess for 10 minutes. We're going to call a meeting of the Board of Supervisors back to order. I'll speak up. Okay, let's take up item number 21. This is the presentation and discussion with the staff regarding the fiscal year 2015-2016 fiscal year budget. Mr. Providenti, are you going to take us through this?
Sure, Mayor, I
All
will.
right, go.
Thank you. Again, for the record, my name is Nick Providenti. I'm the Carson City Finance Director. I also wanted to recognize Nancy Paulson, the Deputy Finance Director, and Sherry Russell, Accounting Manager. Again, they're the brains of the operation. I'm the beauty of the operation. And as Nick Morano says, some things just never get old. So, I mean, I'll probably use that one, you know, for as long as I can. So, we're here to present the 2016 budget. Again, last night I was trying to come up with some themes for the 2016 budget. One theme that popped in my mind was fiscal euphoria. I had that for Supervisor Abowd. The other was good news. I had that one for the mayor. But I think the one I actually settled on was cautious optimism. I think that's kind of the theme that we need to take going into fiscal 2016. It's important to note that when we present these budgets that we try to use conservative forecasts for both revenues and expenditures. Again, it's harder to balance the budget, but it actually reduces a lot of the risks of actual shortfalls. So with that, I will go ahead and start the presentation. And again, you'll also notice in this presentation that there's going to be a lot more charts because when I originally took my presentation to the city manager's office, he kind of gave me the stink eye look because there was a lot of numbers in the presentation, and he basically told me that he's not a numbers guy. It's true. He's not a numbers guy. He's a pictures guy. He said people remember.
He's a Marine. What do you expect, man?
So he suggested that I change some of the charts. So when an ex-Marine colonel, who's also an infantry officer, makes a suggestion, I basically did what he asked. You know, all kidding aside, the city manager and myself spent about the last 2 weeks going over all the line item budgets with all of his direct reports and with the sheriff. And believe me that this, I just want to let you know that this isn't finance's budget. The city manager had a lot of input in this budget as we go through it, and I just wanted to say that. So with that, we will go through the presentation. So again, it's a nice graph, and I think Nancy
Excuse me, Nick.
I'm sorry? Sure.
I just want to ask a question. I noticed that you're starting in on your presentation, and I'd just like a clarifying point, because this item says it does not include the sewer, water, and stormwater funds. So are you under the assumption that on the last agenda item, because we accepted their report, that we approved the sewer and water budget?
Yes.
That's what I was afraid of. Okay.
We can go back to that agenda item.
Yeah,
and
because
can-
all we did was accept their report.
Right. And their report, I believe, recommended that you accept the budget.
So,
I believe that was what the report said, Darren?
Okay, so
Well,
we can come back to that,
sure,
but
we come
and
back to
come
that.
on there, but I just wanted to
yeah.
make sure the public was maybe not understanding.
But
We
we
could
actually
go with their
had planned to
budget.
do a little presentation.
Yeah, we had the presentation up.
And then it just kind of,
I'm reading the recommendation. I mean, it doesn't say, it says, I move to accept the report of the utility finance, the report, that's it, not the
Correct.
budget. That's why I voted on. I move to accept the report of the Utility Finance Oversight Committee from their March 24th meeting.
right.
What's the objection to just taking it all up where we're going on the budget right now and bringing it back?
I have no
There's
problem.
no
No problem.
harm, no foul.
Should we,
Yeah.
you want to tube up that one
I could
first?
do this one
I mean,
first.
we were ready to do it, and the board moved very quickly and
Right.
approved the motion.
I could do this one
Well, I
first.
assumed
and
that
then
was a
do
report
one.
as well, so that, but we'll go. Just do this, and we'll get the water, sewer, and storm budget at the
Okay.
same time. We'll make
Okay.
sure, and if there's any lack of clarity on the record, we will reconsider that vote.
Okay, no, that works for me,
Take a
Mayor.
motion to reconsider it. All right, go.
So as we're going through this, again, we wanted to talk a little bit about the general fund revenue categories. So it's interesting to note obviously our two major categories are C-tax or intergovernmental revenues and property tax revenues. This year, our C-tax revenues are a little over 36%, where the property taxes are about almost 33%. This is going up a little bit, the C-tax revenues in the prior years, and I think there'll be a slide. Last year, the last couple years have been about a third and a third, 33 and 33. The other different revenue types, charges for services, that includes our landfill and our intergovernmental charges, licenses and permits. That includes our franchise fees and our business license fees. And miscellaneous is our interest and, reimbursements, those types of things. Again, on our budgeted property tax revenues, we're expecting them to increase about 2% for fiscal 16. And it was basically done based on the $3.52 tax rate that the board had instructed me to use back in February. Consolidated taxes, so we're having a really good year in consolidated taxes. What I did for the rest of this fiscal year, when I prepared the budget, we only had January through January numbers. So that was 7 months. We were up a little over 10%. So what I did is I took February through June and increased those months by 7% to finish out the year. So we've actually received February since then, and it was up 10% as well. So I think it's probably a good idea to probably keep it a little conservative. I mean, when I was thinking to myself 7%, I didn't really consider that conservative because that's a fairly high number. The past 4 or 5 years since the drop in sales tax, we've been probably averaging about 4 to 4.5%. So that's the number that I used. I took the 15 number and increased that number by 4% for fiscal 16. So that's how we come up with about the $23.5 million. Again, trying to be a little more conservative in this last quarter of the year. If you recall, Bell's and Sportsman's Warehouse opened up last year in March, April. So we've been comparing this whole first 2 quarters against against quarters that didn't, actually the first 3 quarters, that didn't have those stores, in fiscal 14. And I think gas prices, to be honest with you, have been encouraging people to buy bigger cars because our car sales have been doing really well. I got the March numbers from Company, and they were up double digits as well. So I feel good about the rest of this year. Again, I think cautious optimism is kind of the phrase that we want to use. So that's the philosophy on consolidated taxes. Sure.
How are we going to go through this? Can we ask questions as we go?
Absolutely.
Is that all right?
Yeah, let's do. I think it's the best way to do it, Jim, unless you got some other. Everybody feel free to just jump in and ask your questions so we can go forward. Jim, thanks.
Nick, can you just elaborate a little more on the consolidation taxes, what that consists of, and you're saying that the rise in it is from the car sales price going higher and from the 2 stores down in the malls.
Well, that's part of it. I think the economy is helping as well.
Okay.
Just the overall economy. Again, this year we have the legislature in town, so I believe restaurant sales are a little bit higher because we didn't have them last year in the comparisons. So yeah, the C-tax revenues, there's six revenues that we get in C-tax revenues. So there's liquor tax, there's cigarette tax, there's it's the old motor vehicle privilege tax. It's called the government services tax. And then there's the real property transfer tax. Those are the 4 minor type taxes. And then there's what they call the supplemental city county relief tax and the SEC and the basic city county relief tax. So it's 2.25% of our sales of our 7.6% is Carson City's share of the sales tax. So that's what that is. In a nutshell. So again, we're projecting it to be about $23.5 million. So.
And on the property taxes, even though the property tax rate declined, you're still seeing a property per 100
correct
rate decline. You're still seeing an increase in property taxes, and that's because of
It's because of abatement, one, and because of an increase in assessed value. That was another thing that I was gonna indicate to you guys that I forgot, and it's probably a good slide to have that we should probably do in future years is an assessed value slide. And so in 2016, in the fiscal 16 year, our assessed value is projected to be $1,373,408,853. So basically $1,375,000. That's up. Last year, the number was $1,286,896.82. So I don't know what that percentage is in my head. I think it's roughly between 6 and 7%. But I think the good news is that, you know, we bottomed out in fiscal 14. So now we're starting to actually see that amount go up. And that's important because that affects the amount of debt we can issue, because we're limited to 15% of the assessed value to issue in debt. So that lets us issue or takes us, I mean, we were bumping up against that debt limit probably 2 years ago, and now we have a little bit more breathing room because of that assessed value. And also, as that level increases, you know, if it's due to new construction, we're going to get more tax money too, because the tax money's, the new construction is not subject to abatement the first year. So, you know, again, you know, hopefully in the next 2 or 3 years with, you know, with property taxes, we'll have new development, you know, new construction. We haven't had new construction in 6 or 7 years, anything that's worth really counting. So, does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Nick,
Yes, ma'am.
if I can ask, so just for the public, I did put on the back table some copies of questions that I had submitted when I reviewed the budget.
Okay.
So today, though, what I'm only going to try to discuss is salient points based on the questions and answers and responses. But I did want to let the public know, and if staff could please post that so the public would be aware. You sent it in an email, but I think it's important that the public recognizes we are looking at every single line item and watching the dollars to make sure we're doing the best that we can to meet the needs of our community. So if anyone wonders, I'm not going to ask all those questions, I promise.
Well, no, we appreciate that, and we appreciate the time you took to go through that. I mean, it's not an easy thing to do. You know, it's very labor intensive, believe us, we know.
So the first question that really comes from this slide is you are recognizing in the consolidated tax that your projection currently is $23,534,000, yet the documentation, and it is a timing issue, so it's not anything that Nick could have known when he was putting the budget together, because like he said, he's had another month of receipt. But the current budget projections that were utilized had $22,623,782 as the projection for that figure. So there is additional dollars.
Yeah, that 23 million is actually fiscal 16's number. So I think the one you're referring to is the fiscal 15 number, because that number is 4% more than the 15 number.
The point that I'm making is there's, in your projection though, for 15 that's in here, there will be more dollars than you knew at the time when you put this budget together. So we potentially have 300,000 more dollars than what was reflected in the budget, and then we can discuss at a point with the board on the methodology of whether or not we drop it to ending fund balance or whether or not we want to utilize it for a purpose. But I do want to make it clear to the public that we are doing well, and then we just have to discuss the expenditure, and why is because the numbers change based on the date and the receipts.
Correct. Yeah, I think that number that you're referring to, basically, I'll give the board an updated sales tax figure that projects out the remainder of the year, and that updated projection uses the year-to-date increase. So I think the year-to-date increase is over 10% through February. So if we project out the rest of the year at that 10% number, you're correct. We'd get about $300,000 more than using the 7% number that I used in the projection. So that's correct.
Thank you.
Okay.
Excuse me, Nick. I'm a little confused about where the questions that you posed are going to be posted. Is that going to be on our website? Is that what you're asking?
I'm asking that it be posted on this agenda item like a late material or whatever, so the public has access to it.
Well, we could put it in the record and have it included in the minutes.
That's perfectly
If that
fine
would
with
be
me,
adequate.
just so the public has access to the
Okay.
information.
Just want to make sure it wasn't on the website, because if that's the case, I just want to make sure that all questions will be posted on the website. Going back to property taxes, I had a quick question on abatements. Is that something that is, and I know Dave's, the assessors, might still be here, is that something that'll start to be more of a conversation at the board meeting or on property taxes themselves? Or how do we keep track of it? What is?
Well, I'm not really sure. I think it is what it is. I'm not really sure that there's really anything we can do about it. It's just based on what the numbers are. On page 6 of the actual document, of the actual tentative budget document, it has an abatement column. So right now, we're estimating that the property tax rate, the operating rate, we have about almost $3.8 million in abatement. And that's where most of the abatement is in our operating rate, because we raised the tax rate back in 2013 so much. So, we do keep track of that number, and there really isn't anything we can do about it. It just is what it is. As the assessed value continues to increase, I suspect that abatement amount will increase as well, because the most property tax, a property tax owner can pay is 3% more than what they paid in the prior year. So if their assessed value goes up 10%, that difference is going to go into their abatement account. So, does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any others? No? Okay, the next category is licenses and permits. Again, we increased our franchise fees for NV Energy and Southwest Gas. We had taken those franchise fees up over the past 3 or 4 years to the maximum amounts, to the 5% level, and we're at that 5% level now. So we're just increasing them by about 1%, just for growth. Sanitation fees.
Nick, can I ask you there?
Sure.
I know we're taking a look at our charter, our ordinance on telecommunication fees.
Correct.
And do we know whether or not we're capturing all the telecommunications that we should, or have we not crossed that bridge yet?
I don't believe we've crossed that bridge.
Mr. Mayor, I believe you're referring to the video fees
Right, the video
specifically,
side.
and we are working along with the district attorney and the various video providers to ensure that we are in fact collecting the video fees that would be appropriate.
All right, thank you.
Sanitation fees, again, these are the fees that we receive from Capital Sanitation. They increased about 15,000 more in 15, and we increased that number by about 10,000 in 16. That doesn't have anything to do with our landfill. That's just the curbside pickup that we get from Waste Management. And then cable and telephone fees we left flat. On the charges for services, on that column, we increased our internal service charges by about 6%. And again, when we do the analysis for the internal service charges, federal law requires us to use actual numbers, the latest numbers. So the latest numbers that we have are through fiscal 14. So this is the fiscal 16 budget. So really there's 2 years difference there. So that's why we increased those numbers. I believe we increased them by 5% or 6%, I can't remember. And then we have an actual consulting firm come and they actually do the actual cost analysis, and we have brought the cost analysis to you. It has to be approved by the board before we can use it, and the board approved it back in February. Landfill fees, again, are doing really well. They're estimated to be about 8.4% over the 2015 budget. And then we increased that amount by 3% for 16. So it appears that construction's coming back. I don't know, Darren, if that's fair. Yeah, got the thumbs up from Darren, so that's good. So you know, the landfill has been a great asset to the community, and it's really helped, you know, with the finances. So, any questions about that? The next slide, this is one where I got my way instead of the city manager because it's not a graph. So, we just wanted to show the actual property tax rates for the budgeted funds, and you can see, you know, back in 2012, our property tax rate was $3.18, almost 19 cents. That was the year in 2013, you know, kind of right in the middle of, you know, of the recession. We raised it to $3.66. In 14, the 10 cents went away because the Sierra Forest Fire Protection District went away. And then we've been lowering it by 2 cents in fiscal 15 and then in fiscal 16. So, any questions on that?
Yes, if you could, just elaborate on the senior citizens and the capital projects, where that money goes on the senior citizens, I'm sorry.
Sure.
How we allocate that?
Sure. Those are voter-approved, basically 5-cent property tax overrides. They were approved. I think the senior citizens was approved back in the 80s. Both of them, I believe, were approved back in the early 80s. So the Senior Citizens Fund is a special revenue fund. So the 5 cents goes just into that fund, and it's used for, I believe, for the operation and maintenance of the center. So we have 3 employees, and it goes in it, and it pays for the operations and maintenance, mainly the utilities, those types of things of the Senior Citizens Center. So that's all it's used for.
Later in the discussion, do you get to the dollar amount that's actually generated from this yearly?
I could, sure.
Okay. And then also on the capital projects?
Right. The capital projects, again, is a voter approved. It's used for medium-term capital project type items. So it has to be, we can't really use that nickel to fund a 30-year building. It has to be used for equipment, basically 10-year type equipment. So that goes into a special revenue fund as well, and we use that for capital. We'll talk a lot more about that 5-cent capital, the nickel, because that's basically the capital discussion. We have 2 cents of that capital. We use it for debt service. We issued, I wrote that down. We issued some bonds, some medium-term bonds back in 2013, I believe. Let me see where I wrote it down. Yeah, we used it for, here it is. We used it to buy a landfill compactor, some landfill fence and padding, some wheelchair vans, and a new ambulance. And that was back in fiscal 13. We issued 5-year medium-term notes. We're paying approximately $230,000 a year of debt service from that nickel. And that'll be paid off in 2017. So we have fiscal 16 and fiscal 17, and then that $230,000 will be available again for capital. So that's a good thing. So, and the 5 cent, just FYI, it generates about $615,000 in both funds. Okay. Next. Okay, so here's the C-tax history in millions. It's kind of an interesting chart, and I do agree with the city manager. This is better as a bar chart than it is in numbers. So, but pictures. Yeah, you know, I can deal with it. But if you see in 2006, that was kind of the peak at almost $27 million. We bottomed out at in fiscal 10 at about 17 and a half, and now we're starting to gradually go up. Again, you know, 10 years later, you know, we're still not at fiscal 2006 levels. So it's been slow and it's been painful, but again, we're cautiously optimistic. These are the general fund revenues historically. You can kind of see, I think the interesting to note on this slide is in 2007, if you look at the property tax and the intergovernmental revenue, the comparisons, you know, property tax was what, 22%, and you know, intergovernmental revenues were almost 50%. It's about 70% of the revenue. So there was a big disparity. I mean, there was a big discrepancy. I'll get it right. Yeah, a big discrepancy between the percentages where as those numbers, you can see in fiscal 12 and fiscal 13, it was about 33 and 33. So, I mean, it's still, 60 to 70% of the total revenues. It's still the two main revenue sources in the general fund. But they got equal, and now the actual intergovernmental revenue, the CTAX numbers are increasing a little bit more than the property tax level numbers, a little faster. So, on the expenditure side, I think this is another good one, another good pie chart. Public safety is pretty much where it's at, about 47%. You could, we probably, you could talk to the sheriff and talk to, Chief Shrehans. They'll tell you that public safety is where it's at and where it should be. So this kind of proves it. Judicial is about almost 9%. General government, that's, basically that's finance, the assessor, the treasurer, all the other general, government functions. Culture and rec is parks and the library. And then there's, the other minor ones. Health and public works are fairly small in the general fund, but, health, as we know, is all, almost 100% grant funded, so most of their positions are in the grant fund. Public works, they don't have much in the general fund. They're mostly in the enterprise funds and in the special revenue funds. So, and then again, this is just kind of a pie chart, a historical pie chart, and we've basically been fairly close on most of that stuff throughout the 10-year period.
So the expenditures on that chart, the expenditures have been relatively flat since 2000.
Well, not necessarily flat, but it's just how they're compromised, right? The percentages. I mean, we've basically had public safety has basically been 46% of something for the 10 years, and general government has been 20% of whatever the number is. Okay.
Nick, quick question going back to the general fund pie chart. Out of curiosity, when it says general government, could not be maybe in the future, could that be separated from taking the elected officials out of there so we could see what general government is outside the elected officials? What percentages and dollar amounts? Is that something that's possible?
Well, no, I mean, it's possible. There's rules that govern what general government is, that they're generally accepted accounting principles. So we really can't, I mean, we could take them out and show you, how much the elected officials are, but for these purposes, I mean, it's part of the general government function. Okay. So, yeah, you have the number.
246,000.
You can provide it later.
Okay. Yeah, but there's.
I'd be interested.
Right. We actually have those numbers. Yeah. The numbers are in the packet, and I can point them to you offline. Sure. Thank you. No problem. Okay, this is the expenditure categories. So again, salaries and benefits are 75, 76%. Capital outlay is a very minor piece in the general fund, and then services and supplies is about 25%. This has been fairly constant over time. Again, we're a service organization, so no real surprises. I think that number's actually come down a little bit. I thought it was closer to 80 in the past, 77, 78, and now it's about 75, a little bit more. So when we prepared the 2016 budget, these are basically, this is how we prepared it. We used all of our salary projections based on the contracts that are in place, or if we're currently in negotiations with some of our unions, we made these assumptions. So with the firefighters, the chief officers, they have a contract through 2020. So they have, we use 2% COLA and merits if they're eligible. The sheriff deputies, 3% contract adjustment. The sheriff sergeants, merits. The sheriff lieutenants and captains, we're currently in negotiations with them, but we used a 3% contract adjustment. The FOP, we use merits. There's, I think, 3 folks in that union. So the classified and unclassified court employees, we received a court order, I believe, last year They basically adopted the Pontifex study. There was some adjustments to it. So we used that court order going forward. CCEA, we used merits only, although we're currently in negotiations. That one scares me a little bit because it could, I actually increased the contingency a little bit because we're still in negotiations with CCEA, just in case we needed to, something, wasn't agreed upon that we put in the budget, so we have a little wiggle room with them. So I did increase the contingency by about $250,000 just in case. So if we do negotiate an agreement with CCEA and we don't have to use that contingency, then that money would become available for something else as well. So I'm not really exactly sure. We're probably fairly close. I suspect in the next couple months we should be able to negotiate. We should be able to make an agreement. So.
I've asked this before, but when will a new GASB rule on our share of benefit liabilities go into effect? And it's probably not going to be shown on here, but where will it be shown?
So are you talking about are you talking about pensions or everything other than pensions?
Pensions.
Pensions?
Where will it happen? Where will it go?
Nancy Paulson, Deputy Finance Director. It's going on the fiscal 15 financial statements, but they have not come up with our portion.
Where does it go? Where is it categorized?
It'll be in notes, right?
Yeah, it'll be posted in the enterprise funds and then the government-wide financial statements for the general government. So those
I don't understand that. It'll be posted in the enterprise fund?
Right.
Why?
Their portion.
It'll be actually in the statement, on the enterprise fund statements. It won't be, there's various general government funds, like the general fund, all the special revenue funds. What we do is we combine all those and put them as one general government big fund, and that's where that liability will be. It'll be a liability posted on the balance sheet of that statement.
And how does that, if at all, affect the budget that we're putting here together today?
Shouldn't affect it. There's really not much we can do about it. We basically pay what PERS tells us to pay, and then, we just have to share on the liability. So it's not really an out-of-pocket expense. The only thing that would affect the budget, in my opinion, is the amount of money that we pay to PERS for that benefit. And that is built into these budgets, the amount. We'll see that on the next slide. But the amount that we pay to PERS, so PERS is charging us probably more money to try to pay down that benefit or pay down that liability. So it's in that number, basically. There's really not much we can do. We can't pay PERS more to reduce our liability if we wanted to.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, for the public who's watching and listening, it's important when they see that number, because it could be a big number. We haven't gotten it yet. That it's important to understand that number is based on an actuarial projection, as if the city ceased operations today and we didn't continue to make our annual PERS contributions for all the employees. That would be the liability. So it's important to keep the number in context.
Is there a sinking fund that should be created along with that liability or not?
Not with that liability.
Why not?
Because basically we're not really on the hook for that liability. Once somebody leaves, PERS is on the hook for that liability, in my opinion. If somebody retires, then they're not going to go after Carson City for more money for that person. It's on PERS's books, and they're the ones that are responsible to pay that retirement.
That's correct, but there's a liability that's on our balance sheet.
Correct.
So you can't have it both ways. You can't say, well, it's a liability on the one hand, but we don't have any responsibility for it.
Right.
And I understand what it's saying is that, hey, you know what, this is a doomsday analysis.
Correct.
But at the end of the day, in my view, we have to understand that that's going to happen.
It's going to happen.
And I have concerns about what it does to the bond ratings that might have or not have. And two, I don't, you know, and I'll get with you offline after this, but you know, how that liability flows through, if at all, to the income statements. Maybe it doesn't, so I'll talk with you about that.
No, we can have that conversation. I'm not sure that anybody knows how it's going to affect bond ratings, because it's a brand new GASB statement, and it's just happening. It's as of June 30th of this year.
Yeah, but it's
So-
going to affect the 2015.
Correct.
It's going to affect what we're doing here today. I mean, it'll be in effect. for
It'll
this
be in
budget
effect
year.
for FY, right, it'll be in effect for actually the 15 budget, right?
Right, all right, thank you.
And
Sorry.
the only budgets that it'll affect will be the enterprise or the proprietary fund budgets.
And why is that again, please?
Well, it would have to be budgeted.
I'm sorry, it'll be done as a prior period adjustment in all of these funds, so it won't actually hit the income statement. It'll be as if this liability was on our books the whole time. So it won't actually affect the budget. However, everybody has to put this liability on their books, so everybody is gonna have this same exact problem. So hopefully the bond rating agencies understand that, and understand that, you know, our Nevada system is 70% funded our PERS. So the likelihood of us having to pay that out of pocket is nil.
Okay, thank you very much.
Can
Sorry
you
to
tell
cut
me
down.
how much the PERS rate increased that Carson City's gonna have to shoulder because of the, oh, that's the next slide.
Well, this is
That's the rate.
the
How much
actual
is the
number. The actual increase is.
If I may, Nick, hold on. Sure. I'm sorry, before you go to another subject. From what I took away from that last conversation is that there'll be a discussion about this, what the mayor brought up. Would that board be included, or at least be
Correct.
notified of how that conversation came out?
Absolutely. There'll be a discussion when the auditors present the audited financial statements. So there'll be a discussion at the board level, probably in December.
Thank you.
Okay.
I suspect it might be robust. Okay, maybe. All right, go.
Okay, here's the benefit side on PERS. The regular members went up to 28%. So really, it's about 2% of about probably $15 million in the general fund. So we're looking at $250,000 to $300,000 is what it cost.
So our percentage this year for the PERS rate increase was about 300,000?
About that,
Okay,
right.
thank you.
Because that's just the general government, employees. The public safety didn't go up. It stayed the same. So the employer-employee paid number went up to 14.5, and then the police fire stayed the same at 40.5. On our group health insurance numbers, what we did is we budgeted a 5% increase in premium. The actual increase was only 1.75%. So what we're going to do is take that difference and use that, put that in the OPEB trust. So that'll be coming, the actual documents, we've started to get the documents from the attorneys, so we're probably going to bring that back in the first meeting in June to actually establish the trust and, set all that up. And then we've got probably about $400,000 or $500,000 that we can initially put in there, and then we're hoping to put the extra $250,000 to $300,000 a year into that trust to help reduce that other post-employment benefit liability. And that liability is for health insurance. It's everything but pensions. So that is a liability that we have to pay. That is our liability.
And that one speaks more to what the mayor was discussing, is an actual liability that belongs to Carson City.
Correct.
Versus, we don't have Big Brother and PERS to help us with this one. This one's ours. Okay.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Nick, would you tell us what OPEB stands for?
Other post-employment benefits. So it's everything but PERS. So it's health, dental, life, those benefits. Okay. And then on the services and supply side, we left those benefits flat for 16. And we actually haven't increased service and supplies probably in 7 or 8 years. So we're holding the line, which could be problematic in the next 2 or 3 years, but. This is a good one. This is the full-time equivalent employees by fiscal year. So again, this is another one that I kind of want to add on versus the city manager, because I thought the numbers are important. It's important to see the numbers. If you look at 2006, actually 2007 is the high, 637, almost 638 employees. In fiscal 16, we're projecting that number to be 576 employees. So, you know, we haven't really increased employees very much from, you know, the bottom, 2012, 2013. Most of the employees that we have increased have been grant-funded employees. We've lost some employees this fiscal year. You know, we transferred the animal shelter over to the Humane Society, so we lost 7 or 8 employees. The building, we lost a couple of employees there. And then there's also a list, you know, of basically the changes from fiscal 15 to fiscal 16 down there that if you had any questions about, we could answer.
Nick, do you happen to have, or can you provide us the change in the marathon or whoever the temp agency was at the time in 2007 versus, say, the projected 2016 budget? So not only can we look at the total number of FTEs between those 2 years, but also the differential in the temp contract, that would give us a clearer picture of how the supplementation of staff is working with temp help.
Okay, what I could do is give you the dollar amounts, because that's how we budget them. Is that, I mean, okay. Yeah, we can run that number fairly easily. And I don't think they probably changed all that much, did they? I don't know. We'd have to look, because we can run that by that account number. That account number is an hourly account number. It's 0102, and we can just run it for those specific years and see. Right. I know we're spending, with Marathon overall, we're spending 1.1, 1.2 to date million, and I think that number's been fairly similar for the last couple of years. And we're actually going to be bringing that contract back, right, for renewal. And I believe the number was 1.5 that we're asking you to approve. And I don't think we've spent that much, but you know, we're right around 1.2, 1.3 million with Marathon, and it's been fairly similar for the past couple of years. So.
On this FTE reconciliation, I actually want to draw attention, and the reason that I discussed that I didn't think we actually approved the water and sewer budgets, you're adding, and I don't think it's obvious to the public or to anyone else, and I, again, just want on the record and a discussion, and I think the board needs a discussion here. You're adding a water meter tech to the water fund, and we've had absolutely no documentation, discussion, need. Why are we adding this position?
Just
I don't care if you want to do it during the water sewer presentation. I'm drawing this out that I don't like this particular methodology for FTE ads. I think it's, while it's here, if you don't know what you're looking at, you might not realize that we're approving staff increases with no documentation for the need of what the positions do and why we're adding them. So, because there's a few more in here. We're transferring a construction inspector from the building permit fund. We're adding a real property manager, a project manager, and a document control specialist. And we're not having a discussion here. So I would like all of these positions discussed, and I think they're all within Darren's bailiwick. So when we get to his, I don't want to assume we're passing this slide by, meaning we're approving it either. So I'd like those to be specifically drawn out for discussion during those.
I mean, we could do it now if you want, if that's okay.
That's fine too. Either way.
Would it be better? Sherry, do you know?
Darren Schultz, Public Works Director, for the record. where shall we start? The position, the.
4. Go with number 4.
Okay, number 4. So the half of FTE construction inspector from building permits fund. So what's happening is building permits is, as you saw with the growth going up, that division has went from one person. Well, it went from 9 people down to 1 person, 1.5 people. And now as we're getting more and more permits and requests in for development, we're just overwhelmed. So we are adding to that division, and it's being paid for out of those permit fees that we are gathering as people come in for new development, new projects, new buildings, et cetera. So that.
I asked specifically then, where is that reflected? Because if building permit fees are going up, and there was a question I had sent to staff prior to that is flat. So I guess I'm just having a connection issue, is if building permits are coming in higher and the workload is there, why aren't we seeing a small increase that corresponds to that activity?
I think what Darren's talking about is the actual workload happened probably last year and this year.
It did.
And there wasn't any increase in FTEs. So, 3 years ago in the building permits fund, there was $200,000 and $300,000 in revenue. And in the past couple of years, there's been over $500,000 in revenue, right? So I think that's why we're kind of leaving. I mean, we left it flat for this year, but I think what he's talking about is, we've had this problem for like probably a year and a half with these additional revenues and building permit issues.
That's correct.
So the impact was from when you were at 200,000, you went to 500,000, and we didn't add a staff to accommodate that growth.
Right.
And you're expecting that same level for 16 that's higher than 2 years ago at 200,000 or 300,000.
Right. And it is, we have, if you look at the last, few 6 months, 8 months, it's relatively flat, but already what we're seeing there in the office going forward into this season, this summer season, you're going to see a huge spike in what's coming in and what we're looking at. So we feel comfortable that it's not going to drop back down to the 200 number that it was 2-3 years ago. So that's where we're going. That also covers the position, the project manager position. So that position is also working in that fund.
Is it property manager or project manager?
There's two. There's two,
Okay.
but I'm talking about the project manager position. That also will be working in that fund, and that's development engineering, so that's out of the brick, and that salary will be paid for out of fees collected that come in for permitting. So then I'll go to
One second, sorry, Darren.
Yep.
Trying to stay in the same line. I'm a little confused, maybe you can separate, how this construction inspector, I thought we outsourced all of this, or is this separate than the outsourcing?
This is separate. The outsourcing that we did was specifically for the building division. This is the engineering division side of things. So this is the off-site improvements that, utilities coming into the property, those type of things. Not the actual construction, vertical construction of a building.
Okay. So it's utilities only that this, thank you. It would be utilities only that this person would be overseeing, is that correct?
Well, yes, they look specifically at utilities. They look at anytime a set of plans comes in for development, anything that falls outside of the building footprint, they look at. So utilities, curb and gutter, sidewalk, driveways, parking lots, all of that stuff that falls outside of the building but that is within that lot is managed by engineering side of things.
Would they be then overseeing the downtown corridor and things like that?
They would be overseeing the project, the Capitol Mall project, but they would not be overseeing what's going on in Carson Street because that's a public works project. So that's handled under a separate division under a capital project.
Thank you.
Okay, So then we go to the real property manager, and that's something that's been in the works for about a year and a half, and that comes to really a lot of feedback that we've been getting from you as well as the community as to city property that we have, that we own, the city has, and also property that we lease. And we don't have anybody in the city that is overseeing that and managing it. And as we bring things forward, we bring leases forward, we're constantly being asked, well, who's looking at this? Who's reviewing it? Who knows? Who's getting this appraisal done? Is this a fair number? And we don't have an answer for that. It went away some years ago in the downturn, and it's not been managed up until this point. So this is a position that we created. There's a number of different funds that pay for it. It will report into Public Works. There's some open space money paying for that. There's some water money paying for that, some sewer. We spread it out over a number of funds, and this person is going to manage all of the city-owned property and the city leases, either that money we're getting for or that we're paying on for leases. The other thing we're hoping to accomplish by this is that when Larry Warner left, he was our city, the only surveyor that we had here at the city, and we haven't had a licensed surveyor working for the city since then. So this position, we're going to try and combine those two together and actually get a licensed surveyor that can also work as because now when we have maps that require that, we don't have anybody on staff that can sign off on that or approve it. So we're trying to kill both of those birds in one position. I'm hoping we can accomplish that. That's the way we've written the description, and we'll see where it goes.
Darren, before you go on, a couple of questions for you. When you look at the property manager position, can you do an analysis of whether there's a benefit to the city to look at outside firms to handle that versus the cost of bringing somebody in-house, having somebody on staff to do that, to see which, from a cost analysis, which would be better? I know Washoe County has kind of a hybrid system where they have one person on staff, but they use outside firms for the actual management. So maybe it can be staff, maybe it can be outside firm, maybe it can be that hybrid. But let's look at the cost of both ways and see what would work better.
We will. One thing, when we initially looked at it, we thought we would go there because we used a lot of outside back in the heydays, back when you saw those charts where numbers were good. Unfortunately, there's nobody local here anymore, consultings in Carson City, that offer that service. So we would have to be going to Reno or Washoe for that specialty of property acquisition, et cetera, that offer it for governments. So.
Well, I don't know that I agree with that.
Okay. All right.
And then my other question is, just going back to Lori's comment, is normally I personally would expect to see these positions come to us through IFC for approval and not be included just as part of the budget. So I don't know if there's a mechanism where we can kind of ensure that we see these positions come in front of us so that it's a little more transparent, so that we don't run into this issue where there might be the appearance that they're trying to be approved.
Well, these positions are, again, they're enterprise fund positions that I believe the Citizens Committee had heard. They're not general fund positions. All new general fund positions you'll see on the supplemental request list that we'll hear about in a few minutes. So the enterprise funds are basically a little bit different. That's really the only reason. It's not part of the general fund, in my opinion. So I mean, do you?
So are you saying that the enterprise fund employees would not come through IFC?
I believe they did come through IFC. They did come through IFC. These all came from, through IFC, correct?
But they didn't come through IFC to us.
Well, they're coming to you now, basically, because the IFC, the other positions, we're adding to the current budget. If we're adding a new position, and we're requiring department directors to come to you and ask for the position, that's in the current budget year. So that's adding to the 15 budget. Well, this is not part of the 15 budget. It's going to be new in 16. So that's, I mean, I think that's the distinction. They did come to IFC, but we're asking you to approve them for the 16 budget. So.
Okay.
I mean, we can make them more transparent, if you'd like. I mean, that's not a problem. Again, on the general fund side, it'll be spelled out fairly obviously that we're asking for new positions.
Well, and I think that Lori's comment, and she can correct me if I'm wrong, and what I'm saying is that normally we would see a separate agenda item just for the new positions, which is the way we'd be used to seeing it. So to have it come through in the budget like this and have to actually pick it out in the footnotes, to me,
Okay.
it's too easy to miss it that way.
Sure.
And I think the other issue with representing it this way, I can't see the costs. I can't find it, I can't pull it out, and neither can the public. So I'm just asking you, can you tell me how much is the real property manager with his benefits and his costs? And so what I'd like to see is that all positions, we need justifications and a documentation sheet that shows, if we add this person with a start date of July 1, is that the intended action here? Because I don't know, because there's no information. And I don't want to add the authority for you to do this position until we get the analysis on whether this could be bid. And so if we pass this, you've got the authority to go hire the person on July 1, and we don't get to see if there's an opportunity, if there's a cost benefit to putting it out to bid.
Well, I think you could give us the authority, just give us the monetary authority, and then.
Not put it in the FTE.
Not put it in the FTE, and then we'll do the analysis and then bring it back to you. I think that's fair,
Okay.
right?
That is fair, but I want to go back to, what you talked about, Washoe Valley is, it's still, even if we hire a private firm to do this work for us, somebody has to manage that. And we have engineers. We don't have real property managers. And it's been a struggle for years for us to try and figure this out. And unfortunately, we bring things forward and there's all kinds of errors in them. And I'm not talking about words, I'm talking, and that's embarrassing for me, but I don't know how else to fix that. I don't have people on staff that understand that. And so I've been trying to figure out how we're going to do it. And so that this was my goal, was to do that. I think that this person may be augmented or supplemented. For instance, if we do a capital project where we have to go and purchase a bunch of right-of-way or something, we would seek additional help to do that. But just in general, these leases that we have, they add up, and somebody's got to go through them and figure out, is it right? The other thing, the other side of the coin is the city owns a lot of property, lots and parcels just scattered around the city. And nobody's watching that. Should we be holding that? Should we be selling it? Should we be leasing it?
I think those are all super valid points, and I think it drives home what we're talking about, that all positions need to come with justifications, because I think you're doing a good job to justify what you're doing. It's just, it's new to the board. We don't have any documentation in here to support this request. And so I think you're on the right track. And I do think that enterprise funds matter just as much as the general fund, because the ratepayer is then assessed in the enterprise funds. And so just because it's not general fund, I'm not buying that the FTE don't need to come to this board to be discussed, because ultimately the taxpayer then gets to pay an increased water rate and increased utilities because we've added positions into those accounts. So
No, and I think that's fair. I think it's a learning curve on both sides. We'll do what you really want us to do, and if this isn't the preferred way to present these, then we'll definitely do what you want us to do. I think that's fair. Yeah, it's a learning curve on both sides. So.
Well, and I think, when we do this, we need to take a look at the policy, because there is a policy on what general fund employees' additions have to come to us. And I don't know off the top of my head whether or not that policy applies to the enterprise funds or not. So when we do these things, just take a look at that. All right.
We're going to talk about I want to talk about the water meters.
Okay. So, number 6, okay. Added 1 meter, water meter technician to water fund. Okay, so this position was, the justification behind it is we are in the process of, our water meters, we're behind the 8 ball, and we have to replace our water meters about every 10 years. And the reason is because that's about their useful life, and the sensors, the reading of what, when we drive down the road and it sends out a signal to pick up that, how much water that lot has used, just wears out. And the problem is we've pushed this down and pushed this down for a number of years, and it's starting to catch up with us where these water meters are failing quicker than we can repair them and keep up with them. The problem when they fail, or a number of them fail, our process of being able to drive and get a water read doesn't work, and we have to physically go out and open up the water meter box and read the meter manually and write it down. So we are at Public Works, that's something we noticed as hey, that's costing us more money to constantly this be in arrears. We need to get this up to speed. Let's go in and replace these meters and try and get a program going to where we fund them appropriately every year in our budgets, the actual meters, but also the technicians to fix them, to repair them, so that we're not getting so far behind the 8 ball. So that's where this position is. It's an additional technician, but it's not. We're still under where we were before we got crushed in 07, 08 timeframe. I mean, as far as staffing that division back up, we're still under about 2 FTEs even with this position.
And we can, well, I'm trying to relate it to, in the budget itself, you're upping the water meter purchases to like 800,000, and the prior two, you can tell I actually read every line item in here, I'm sure,
Yes.
but I did. The water meters goes to somewhere around 800,000, and you used to have, the prior 2 fiscal years, about 200,000. And are you indicating, does a water meter tech person install
Yes.
those water meters?
Yes.
And so one tech can put in another $600,000 worth of meters? And how many approximate meters is that? I'm trying to scope
Sure.
your
sure.
request for 800,000 in meters and the people that you have. Is this a right match?
Right. No, it doesn't. I can't. I mean, that's 800,000 in meters. That's. I'm trying to think off the top of my head how many specific meters that is. But yes, this position along with our other meter tech would go out and be installing these new meters as well as repairing the existing meters that we have that can be repaired. They pull them out, bring them into the shop and repair them and put them back together. So I can't, I'm sorry, I don't have in front of me what specifically how many they could install in a day or throughout the year. I don't know that off the top of my head.
And I'd be willing for later, you can send me the analysis of, I just think 800,000 in meters is huge.
It is.
That you've put in, and I'm like, wow, I wonder how many homes. Are we doing any new technology? Is there any other computer? It's only replacement is what you're saying, to keep
It
the
is.
existing technology
It is.
in place?
It is. And we took a step up into new technology about 15 years ago, and that was the technology where we don't have to physically read them, but we could drive by and it would send it into a computer. The next technology is those automatically upload electronically into the cloud and then come back down to us. And we're looking at that, and I think we'll probably go there eventually, but right now it's cost prohibitive and there's a lot of kinks in the system. They haven't got it dialed in as close as we would be comfortable with. But that is something that we're looking at down the road. If and when that happens, then yes, we will, all of the actual meters that the water runs through doesn't have to change, but the connectors on top, the electronics all have to change. And then we have to put, throughout town, we have to build almost a Wi-Fi system to where all this stuff can go up and then be sent into the computer. The other advantage to that is then everybody in their house can real-time see how much water they're using every day, which would be nice for conservation and that sort of thing. But that's a little ways down the road. So we are looking at it, but this is, what we're talking about here today is just to try and, we're not keeping up with the repairs and the broken meters that we have and have had for the last 2 or 3 years.
Okay, Nick, keep going.
Okay. So on the general fund expenditure side, again, we kept these numbers flat. We appropriated the $466,804 in community support funds, which again was the same as in 15. And then we show a state push-down list. These are what the state is actually charging us for services. And I believe, Lori, one of your questions was on Child Protective Services.
So they've already given us that number? Oh, okay, so it's a document they've already, they're on a rolling piece too. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, so
Well, the
that's a
number
rash of additional kids, or they've had other increases
Well,
that
do you
they're
want to
pushing
answer that? I
down?
mean, there's
Well,
been a lot of
actually,
discussion.
we have disputed this number. We had a meeting with Richard Whitley, the interim Health and Human Services Director, on this. Based on estimates that the Department of Health and Human Services had gone through in the past, they readjusted up the assessments for counties. Pretty much every county across the board saw a similar increase, with the exception of 2. Clark and Washoe both run their own child protective services. There is a provision in NRS for counties to opt out. I have threatened them that we would do that. It would be a long-term process. It would take us basically through the end of the next session before we would be able to do that. But this is quite a large increase, as you can see. It'll go up again next year as well. I don't anticipate it's going to have the depth of the increase we saw this year. But for $500,000, we could run one heck of a program. And the other thing that we are not happy about, and the DA has really been leading this charge, is we're not happy with the service level we've gotten from the state. We have a number of just chronic vacancies. It leaves both the children who are at risk here, it leaves them, vulnerable to additional harm. So we have not been happy with the level of service, in addition to now what we think is an unreasonable increase in cost for what we're getting. So we do have the possibility to opt out. It is going to require a longer-term process in order to do that. The DA is very much engaged in this to protect, the rights and the health of the children involved here. But this is a problem.
Nick,
I want to agree on that.
What was the rationale for this type of an increase? Were you given one?
Well, they did a reassessment. Part of it was legislatively directed to them. And part of it was just an additional assessment that I have not gotten a satisfactory response for why it went up so high. So to answer your question, I hate to give an imprecise answer to a specific question, but I have not gotten a good answer to that question on why it went up so much.
Well, a couple of years ago, Assemblyman Livermore passed a bill that would require maybe the wrong word, that would provide for an audit of these services that the state's pushing down on us. I don't know where that is right now, but it seems to me, when I listen to some of those legislative things, it's a lick and a promise. Mm-hmm. I mean, we talk about what we're doing here today. They're not even close to that. I mean, that's so, and I do think it's worthwhile for us to look at, can we do it ourselves? And so.
Yeah, it's certainly a possibility, and I think, again, for that much money, even for significantly less than that, we could run one heck of a program, provide better service. CASA has been very intimately involved in this, writing letters to both the governor and now the interim HHS director. So, yeah, this is a big problem, I think.
Well, Nick, I think if I'm picking up correctly, everyone nodding their head, I think the board would tend to agree with you, but my question is, you said you threatened to opt out or something to that effect. How do you opt out of this? What is the procedure for doing that?
Well, again, off the top of my head, I'm going to have to remember the process through NRS. It does have to be approved, I believe, by the legislature and signed by the governor for us to opt out. So we have to have the program and our plan in place on how we would accomplish this function, submit it, have it approved, have the governor sign it, and then we'd be able to opt out.
Not to labor on it, I'm just curious, have other communities opted out of this?
Clark and Washoe both run their own programs, and the Washoe program particularly is problematic for us. Because the county runs it, they pay significantly more than what the state does. That creates the chronic position vacancies for these caseworkers. A lot of them will come in, they'll get their initial training, and they're gone. They're either in Washoe or they'll go down to Clark County. So, yeah, part of the problem we have is that we have an adjacent county that pays significantly more and has a much larger workload and can absorb, I mean, we're not talking about many people, we're talking about 2 or 3 people, significant for us, not as significant for Washoe. That may be what they need to hire every year. So it's just, it creates really, kind of just a systematic problem that we're going to have trouble addressing. Part of the fee increase, though, is the state answer on how they're going to solve the problem. They are going to increase salaries for our caseworkers. We'll see how that works out.
Well, and then when it goes to IFC, when we put it to IFC, that's when the rubber meets the road, and the state says, well, why are you taking our money? Then you'll find out what the real dollar is. Don't worry. So it'll all come out in the wash some point, but okay, go. Sorry.
Okay, good on that. Then this next slide is the actual supplemental request recommended by IFC for a funding slide. And again, I apologize. The more I think about it, we should have included those other positions on this list, and we'll do that in the future. There's no question about it. So the actual request recommended by IFC, again, you'll notice that we have about a little over $111,000. There's one position that we're requesting that you add, and that's changing the hourly clerical to full-time MA1 position in the assessor's office. He had come to the board and got that changed temporarily for fiscal 15, and we had told him that he would have to come back through the supplemental request process to get it permanent. So we are recommending that we hire that position permanent. The other ones are basically hourly budgets. There's, in Parks and Rec, there's a 1039 hourly maintenance custodian budget. I think it's for this building, working in the mornings. The other two are offset by program revenue, so there shouldn't really be a cost to those, as we're going to be increasing the program revenues. And then there's some hourly library assistant mileage, some software maintenance, and some maintenance contracts with the sheriff, and some travel for fire. So those are what we recommend to the board, that the board fund.
So Nick, can I ask, were the program revenues, were those actually in the budget that to offset the hourly? Because those look pretty flat to me too. Just as and you can look it up later to see if there's an adjustment.
They're not in there right now.
I was going to say I didn't see the revenue there.
Right. If you approve them, we'll add them to those,
okay.
to those revenues.
Okay, because it's like it's not there.
Right.
And then just for purposes of the public and stuff, if Dave could tell us what this position that we'll be permanently adding, what does it do for the assessor's office and the taxpayer, so that they understand what the position does?
Thank you, Supervisor Bagwell. The current position right now, she does all of the office functions. She's the purchasing agent, she's the payroll agent. She does all of the scanning that we require in our office. She handles the exemption, the Veterans Exemption Program, the Widow and Blind Exemption Program that we talked about earlier this morning. She is the administrator for that. She is also the person who sends out their owner occupancy cards to determine which property tax cap the property is entitled to. And also she sends out the rental affidavits to determine whether or not the rents are over fair market value, to determine again which property tax cap. It is a full-time job. It's really helped us out because prior to her becoming full-time, I was doing all of the payroll, I was doing all of the purchasing, and it was causing, there wasn't a chain of command, there wasn't a checking policy that we were able to administer, and this really did clear that up. And so I am asking you for this position, please.
Nick, I have a question for you on the maintenance service contracts for under the Sheriff's Department. Are we not maintaining something at this point? Was it excluded from the budget, or what is the purpose of the maintenance contracts? What is it for? And are we just not doing it? Is it just deferred maintenance at this point, or what is it?
Yeah, in reference to your question, I believe what we are speaking about is a maintenance service contract related to our infrastructure systems. The Athena Group maintains our server programs or our server equipment at our dispatch facility, and it was recommended highly by IT that we enter into this agreement.
So currently it's not being maintained, or it's being maintained in-house?
It is being maintained right now. As the conversion goes through, what you folks are familiar with as the Tiburon project, we are converting from one base system to a Windows-based system, and this group will take on that task of maintenance of that system. It's the same contract, it's just additional work.
So it's a new system, replacing the old Tiburon system? Okay. Thank you.
Then maybe we can get some info on the annual software maintenance from IT as well.
John Wilkinson, IT Director. This is a line item that covers most of the maintenance costs for software used throughout the city, and it's a big number. It's at $385,000 this year. It goes up every year. We don't know at this point in the year how much it goes up, but vendors will typically do a 2, 3, 5% increase. Tiburon, for instance, almost always does a 5% increase. It's going up, and I just want to make sure we have enough in there to cover what our bills will be. In the regular part of the budget, you will see I've moved some funds from a few other categories into that software account to beef it up, but that's not beefing it up quite enough. And so the specific justification I use for these two amounts, our Tiburon maintenance is going to go up about $7,000 as it goes up 5% almost every year. And we're taking on maintenance for a product that's central to the city, Documentum, where we have millions of documents stored in electronic format. For the past few years, that has not been a bill that has been paid by IT. It's been paid by the clerk recorder's office, and in speaking with the finance office, they would like us to take this bill back on, and so I've in turn asked them for additional funding, and So it's about 17 and another 7 to make up that 26,000 in that annual, that's in this particular increase.
John, then my follow-up question would be if the 15,590 under the sheriff line item is also for the Tiburon system, how is that different than the additional money that you need under the software maintenance? Is one for software and one for hardware?
The additional that I'm requesting is because Tiburon bills us a certain amount every year. So it's going to be over $160,000 in this upcoming year. The sheriff's request is for consulting work, consulting support that they've always had from Athena. And Athena specializes in supporting Tiburon systems. When we first went into the new Tiburon contract, Tiburon was suggesting that we needed 2 employees two employees full-time to support the system. And we get away without doing that by having Athena. And that's the sheriff's item I'm talking about right now, but I can explain why they're of value and why it's different. They're a private contractor, and they support Tiburon almost exclusively, and they do system health checks. They monitor the system on a daily basis and just make sure the system's healthy, and neither IT nor the sheriff's office has to devote any personnel to doing that.
So the request under the sheriff is for the consulting agreement, and the additional money that you're asking for is an increase in the licensing fee.
Not precisely licensing, but support for the licensing fee, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Can you re-clarify for me that you're now going to pick up an expense that was previously out of the clerk's recorder's account?
Yes,
And
ma'am.
so then is there a corresponding reduction? Because are we transferring this
Well-
service and going to account for it in the IT budget now?
It was basically special money that Alan Glover, it's the clerk technology fund.
Technology money.
Right, that Alan Glover was okay with us using, and I believe Sue has different views of how she wants to spend that money. So,
I knew something. I knew there was more to it.
I could, Sue Merriweather, I could jump in on this. The reason that Alan was using that technology funds was because the real property tax, transfer tax, we were recording and we were making a lot of money recording documents, and that fund had grown. But now that the recordings have dropped, that fund has dropped, and we are not saving any money for our own technology, for our own office. We need to do some improvements to the recorders, and we need to do some training, and because the funds aren't available like they were years ago or over the past years, I had asked that IT take over this, I guess, annual fee for the software for the whole city. And it was paying for the whole city. So that's where that kind of came from. So we kind of drained that fund, and so we actually went over budget on it.
So we are actually changing the funding source then. We're now going to create this as a general fund expense instead of using technology fees to accommodate it. Okay, just so, that's why it's on the supplemental. I'm like, why is this on the supplemental? It's because we're actually going to change the funding mechanism for this service. Okay, thank you.
That it?
okay, that's it for the supplementals. Now, so this is kind of our worksheet with the 2014. We have a little different filed tentative budget versus proposed tentative budget. We originally filed the tentative budget on April 15th, and if you see that operating transfer out for $100,000, between April 15th and probably a couple weeks after that, the city manager and I were speaking about some refunding bonds that we're going to be bringing to you folks in the summer. We're actually going to be probably saving, we're estimating right now, between $1.5 million and $1.6 million over the next 5 or 6 years in interest savings, and it's all general fund interest savings. So we're going to be recommending that you use all that savings to fund capital. That's going to be our recommendation. So we've actually, kind of looked at the numbers a little bit and decided that we needed to spend that money in capital in fiscal 16. So we're recommending that we increase that amount from 100,000 to 775,000. And there is another board item later on in the presentation that kind of outlines how we came up with that number and how we recommend spending that number. So another thing that we're going to have to do that Supervisor Bagwell had pointed out to us is that we didn't include the NNDA number. We inadvertently left that amount out for 2016. So we're going to need to add that back. We're going to need to add that expenditure back because the board did approve that, and that'll be another $75,682. So that'll reduce the fund balance number a little bit. From 5.13, it'll be about 5.04 or 5. I did the calculation, and it still falls within the 5% number, but that was just an error. We just didn't include that NNDA amount, so that will be.
We'll have to rename Supervisor Bagwell Hawkeye.
Hawkeye. No, it's good to have that set of eyes. Actually, it really is. It helps. So anyway, we have. If you look at the estimated 2015 budget, we're recommending or we're estimating that we're going to have about 8.34% in fund balance. That's quite a bit more than, the budgeted amount was, what, 5% basically. So, we're bringing in this extra revenue from CTAX, and that's mostly what we're anticipating that's going to do. It's going to fall into fund balance this year, and then we're going to try and spend it, or hopefully recommend that we spend it in capital, and it's about $875,000 because we're going to establish the extraordinary maintenance fund that we talked about in February for the $100,000, and then we're going to transfer the $775,000. We want to transfer that out to the capital projects fund. So that's the recommendation. This is what we think it'll look like when it's all said and done at the end of 2016, the fund balance. And that's about the general fund. It didn't take too long, right? A couple hours. We do want to talk about some of the other funds as well. I guess we could just go ahead and talk again.
Well, let's go ahead and talk through, then we'll see where we go on
Okay.
some discussions and motions, because
Okay.
I think, let's get it all out there, and
Okay.
then we'll take it up and see where we go.
I'm sorry, just bear with me one.
Sure.
If you can go back, Nick, to that last slide where you mentioned the 775,000, you wanted to go to the capital. So that'll go from 100,000 to 875 or 775?
Well, it's 775 plus the 100,000 for the extraordinary maintenance. So basically, it's going from 200,000 to 875, because the extraordinary maintenance fund is really a capital. It will be used for capital as well.
Okay. And for the general public and everyone, at your ending fund balance 3.3 in the proposed 2016 final budget, ending balance is 3.3 million?
Correct.
What does that mean in layman's terms?
That's how much is going to be basically in the bank at the end of the year.
And what do we do with that money?
Well, you have to maintain a minimum of 4% per law of ending fund balance. Our policy is 5%, so it's just basically a reserve fund for all intents and purposes is what it's used for.
I think in an ideal world, something that people could relate to, we're striving to get, even though we're going to spend a little bit of fund balance here on capital, we want to get to 8.3%. What that would mean is we would have one full month of general fund expenses in fund balance. So we want to get back to 8.3% fund balance. That'll give us 1 month of operating expenses.
All right, so the 5% is 5% of our total general fund operating expenses that we're having in reserve. Basically, it's our fund balance.
And if you go back to the keeping the 8% in, or 1 full month, as Nick just explained, what is the benefit for that? Is that just a safety net?
That's what it is.
Out of the 3.3 million, if we maintain, what we'd prefer to keep is 5%. Is that correct? That's our goal?
That's board policy right now.
That's our
It
goal.
was 8.3%, and the board changed it probably in 2011, to reduce it to 5%. The minimum that we have to have by state law is 4%.
4%.
Right.
What is the direction we're looking? Are you going to look for direction if we want to keep all of this, or we just want the 5%, or if we want 4%? You're looking from the direction from the board?
But this is what we're recommending. So I believe if you agree with this and you'll direct us to go ahead, what we're looking for is for direction to take the tentative budget and make it the final budget. And that final budget will be approved by the board on the third Monday in May 18th. Right? So by law, it has to be done by May 18th. So that's the direction we're looking at. We know we're going to have a few changes from the tentative budget to the final. We're going to have, we would like to increase the capital transfer. We need to probably add that $75,000 for the NNDA amounts. And then there's we want to go ahead and actually include the supplemental requests into the actual budget. We just kind of have a separate line item now that says supplemental requests $111,000. So if you agree to those supplemental requests, we'll actually put them into the body of the budget, into the actual department that it belongs in. So those are the type of things that we're looking for today, is that direction.
And if we increase the reserve to the 8%, do we get a better bond rating or anything like that by the reserves we hold?
Yeah, I don't know that we'll get a better bond rating, but it's a good thing to have. The problem is that if you increase that reserve rate, you're going to have to cut expenses somewhere. So you're going to have to not transfer the capital or reduce expenses somewhere. I mean, that's really the only way that we can increase that reserve amount.
By having the reserve, whatever dollar amount that is there any repercussions when you go back to negotiate salaries with employees? They say you have this amount of money in the reserve.
Well, they can't touch up to, the current law is 1 month, is 8.3. I believe there's negotiations at the legislature to make that 3 months worth, 25% of reserves, where they can't touch that money. I don't know if 25% will become law, but currently it's the 1 month, it's the 8.3%.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so does that mean we just agreed we want to talk about the changes for direction to the general fund? Because they're...
Why don't we do that now?
So that we take care of general fund?
If you're comfortable doing it.
Sure,
let's
I
see,
am.
because I know you've got some things you want to tee up for discussion, so we'll
Okay, so...
You got the floor.
So the first issue, I think in the general fund for discussion, is the potential that there's another $300,000 available from C-tax receipts that we could or could not spend. And Nick P., or Tall Nick or something, whatever.
Tall Nick.
Tall Nick, yeah. Yeah, good news, Nick. I'm liking good news, Nick. Had indicated that he'd like to wait more till December to make the decision on whether or not to spend that, because my interest here is I've really scrubbed the budget and working hard because I think the public in Carson City has voiced their opinions strenuously, indicating that roads need to be a priority in our community. And so I am looking across the spectrum here and how we can meet the public's request. You know, and certainly this budget is much theirs as it is all of ours. And so the question becomes, we will know the C-tax receipts around August 20th, 25th, something in that range. We actually have the final numbers, and we don't have to wait for an audit to know those C-tax numbers. And so the discussion for us as the board is, do we want to look to funding some more for the roads with this potential $300,000, and I know that it is unique and the board has not previously put general fund to this activity, but I think the discussion needs to be had and we shouldn't ignore it. And is this a priority that the board has to help in roads? And maybe the two RTC representatives can weigh in. So part of the things is the NNDA funding will have to obviously we made a commitment. Do we have a contract with NNDA? So we owe them the $75,000 for the next fiscal year. So that add-in, we have to honor our commitment, should be put in. But a question I have is, when will we have the GIS, which is a Douglas County agreement that we do? Will we are we negotiating right now with how much that contract level is? Is there enough in there to hopefully fund the NNDA? Is that an opportunity? I don't know where the GIS is at.
Well, go ahead, Darren, if you want to tee it up.
And we can explain what that is to the public.
The GIS contract with Douglas County, we are under negotiations right now, and we are planning to bring it back second meeting in June. We would like to do that sooner, but there's a lot of things going back and forth, and we're looking at tweaking that contract a little bit, so we can't do it before then.
I'm going to meet with the county manager tomorrow at 1 p.m., and we're going to discuss that. We're looking to reduce it, just.
Is the assessor involved in those conversations? Because I know he had some opinions on the GIS system.
The aspect that we're talking about with Douglas would not affect currently the level of service to the assessor.
I guess what I'm asking is, has anybody asked his input on that? Because I think that he had some very distinct opinions about the system and the funding and our contract with Douglas County. So I would just ask that his comments be included.
I will.
So, all right. And then, again, I did put this out there for the others. There were several items. So the alternative sentencing fees for drug testing, we discussed and approved an increase in the fees. And Nick, your comment is that we don't know whether the 20,000 will be there or not, so wait and see. I'd like to recommend to the board that we at least budget in 10,000. How about half? So I agree with being conservative, but I'd like to put 10,000 into the budget. I don't want to have zero. We just increased the fees, and you used 20,000 as your good judgment in the item that we approved, so I'm willing to split the difference and put 10,000 into the budget for a fee, unless you see any reason okay, 10,000. And then on the public safety complex, sorry.
Yeah.
These are just my recommendations.
You're negotiating here.
You guys can vote no, or say no.
Okay.
Sorry.
I think you're negotiating. Everyone agreed to 10.
All right.
I
We can
think
go
it's
each
open
item.
for discussion. I don't think
Go
we're
each
going
item,
to
okay.
negotiate. I'll talk for a minute.
I know people have done a lot of work on this, and so what I want to do is make sure that we, one, take an orderly approach to making our decisions on these topics. So, Lori, if it's all right, why don't we just take up the issue of the 300,000 of going to the streets, and then if you want to make a motion to that effect, we can see if it gets a second, then we can discuss whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing or whatever. So, if you want to do that, we'll see where it goes.
As the chair of RTC, I think Supervisor Bagwell's been looking inside my head, which is probably scary, because I was looking to see if we could find $250,000 to $300,000 to address the citizens' concerns about roads, which comes up consistently as one of the top issues for the city. So if we can find between $250,000 and $300,000 from general fund savings somewhere, I would like to apply that specifically to consumer-driven street maintenance issues.
Let me ask before we get to a motion then, the other side of that is there's a capital project that's not going to be funded. What is that, and what's the public analysis of streets versus another capital improvement project, or has anybody done the due diligence on that?
Well, I think in this particular case, what we're looking for is additional savings so that it wouldn't necessarily mean that another capital project isn't going to be completed.
I disagree with that. I think that at the end of the day, we're looking at $300,000 that can go to capital improvement, and as I look at the capital improvement list, we've got, cop cars out there and things of that nature. So this is not additional, this is money, but it's not that the capital improvement projects don't need it either. So, the way I look at this, it's a question of, do the streets and highways take precedence over a cop car? Or an ambulance. I don't, those things. So I just want to hear the discussion on that. That's what I want to know.
Yeah, I looked at fleet for the sheriff's or for public safety as well, because that was my second largest concern. And looking at the capital list and what's being approved, I thought that that had been adequately addressed. But I understand your concern, and I don't necessarily agree with you that at some point, capital is capital, whether we're funding it this year or next year. But I do think, again, as chair of the RTC, and my own personal opinion is that this is one of the biggest issues facing the citizens, or at least it's the one that they complain the most about. And I do think I would like to see some money from the general fund go to address these specific complaints on streets.
Can I ask a question? How much does 300,000 accomplish? I think it's about what we can, the best bang for the buck, actually. I look at 2 pages of capital improvements that we can't fund, and a 300,000 minimum amount of money that we have. How many streets, what can we fix, what would work, what's the best value for the dollar?
I think that's an excellent question, Darren, and you can probably articulate that pretty simply.
And Darren, before you start again, I just want to clarify, my thinking is that we would be able to use this money specifically to address not necessarily an entire street, but to maybe do some crack filling or pothole fixing or specific issues that come up, and not necessarily take $300,000 and do one additional street.
I'm glad you clarified, because I was gonna answer on to the previous as far as fixing a street. So if you took $300,000 and put it in a separate fund for a complaint fix type thing, that would, we could fix more potholes, we could seal more cracks, we could do more shouldering repairs. So absolutely that would help there, because that's the maintenance side of streets, and it's small and it's hurting for sure. I'm not going to weigh in as to the worth of that compared to the other services within the needs that we have in other departments here at the city. So
Darren, just, on a quantitative, to try and get a picture for the public, I mean, $300,000, how far would that go in terms of potholes and, in the entire city, in terms of repair? If you had to give a percentage of how far that would go.
okay, well, let's look at it this way. For crack sealing, our goal has been, we divide the city up into 8 segments, and we do 1 segment every year. So every 8 years, we get back to that segment. So crack sealing within that segment is, we spend somewhere between $200,000 and $300,000 a year to do 1/8 of a city. So if you doubled that, we could do twice as much crack sealing. I would say that's directly how this would all go. It would just, there would be more cracks. The other thing we're running into is the cracks, we seal them, but they're becoming bigger. I know everybody knows that. So it's not a matter of just going and putting some tar in there. Now it's a matter of cutting the crack, removing it, and putting, hot mix back in there. As you might imagine, that's about 5 times more expensive than just juicing some tar in there. So, yeah, those things vary, but yeah, sure, it would help.
Jim.
What is the budget for street maintenance and repair yearly?
Cindy will get that for me. I don't know it offhand, sorry.
I didn't think you would, but.
$500,000.
So we'd almost double.
75%.
Yeah, I'll talk. So we'd almost double it, correct? We could add this to it. Thank you.
Let me ask you this question. You know, we have a lot of discussion today about expenditures, additions, and things of that nature. How do I know that if I transfer $300,000 out of the general fund to RTC, has RTC done any analysis on where that $300,000 would be used now that I can have that data today? And the second thing I'd like to know is, if you take the $300,000, what capital projects on the other side of the ledger are not funded or wouldn't be funded? And the third thing I'd like from Nick Providenti is this is, suppose you do that now and the dollars don't materialize. What's the effect on the city? Those three questions.
Well, I can answer the last one. I mean, if the revenues don't materialize and you've already spent the money, then you're going to have, right, we'll probably be below 5% in fund balance. So that's why I'm not sure that it would matter if you wait. I mean, if you allocated the money now, or if you just waited until the end of, like Supervisor Bagwell said, waited till August or September when you know what the additional money is going to be, and then earmark it for something at that point. I mean, the board can basically just say, you know, we're going to earmark it for capital now, and so we'll just separate it out, and then you can make a decision then.
Well, essentially, that's where it's gone anyway, because it's ending, it's
Right, it's an ending fund balance, and then we'll
$775,000.
Correct, and we'll augment the budget at that time based on the
Okay,
decisions
so
that you'll make at that
so
time.
the next question is, what capital projects are not funded? And the third question for you, Darren, is this. Help me understand why I should just hand over $300,000 without a plan on how that's going to be expended that I can look at here today. Help me understand that.
So
give me a rationale why I should do that.
So I can answer the $300,000 question. I suspect that what we would do is we would just take $300,000 from that list that didn't get funded, and those amounts would get funded. I mean.
What are they?
It looks like there's a fire station 54 vehicle exhaust system, entry mats and window coverings at the community center, some tile replacement at the aquatic facility, a pickup truck for building maintenance, citation devices for the sheriff, a couple of patrol cars, actually about probably 4 more patrol cars, and then a maintenance ceiling program on the bike paths, and some surveillance cameras for the pool. It looks like that would probably get us to about the $300,000 level. So five vehicles, and then some maintenance, basically. So it would just be the next items on that list. That would be what I would recommend.
Help me understand then, maybe the board, this is a question for the board, but help me understand the public policy of choosing one of those projects, take a cop car, over roads. Help me understand what analysis should go into making that decision.
Well, I'll take a shot at it.
Go.
So why don't we just discuss then in general that we got a list of capital projects to fund of $1 million, there's a $6 million need, and we don't have any documentation on any of those. So I'm actually going to agree with you in theory, what you're discussing here. This does not provide us information for this board to look at items and weigh what you're talking about here. We don't have that on any of this.
Well, on the capital improvement projects, that's an ongoing process that the data is historically built up. And so I'm comfortable with the dollars that go into that. And, you know, we can always ask for the backup material on it, but I think that I'm comfortable as to what those dollars are. I'm just asking, you know, I just worry that, and believe me, Lori, I understand, you know, that the streets are an important issue here, but in trying to find a way to justify in my own mind how you do this, that's all I'm trying to get at. So.
Well, let's talk about the potholes and the cop car that hits the potholes and keeps ruining the car because we're hitting all the potholes. and everybody else's cars in town that are driving. I think everything that we do here, we do have to weigh it, but roads are as much your infrastructure and need to be taken care of too. And the impact is to the public in roads.
Well, if I can jump in here too, again, as the head of RTC, we have a lot of capital needs that we need to fund. But if you go back and look at our history over the last several years, we funded less than 50% of the required maintenance of our roads. And when we do that, we get to a point to where the roads begin to deteriorate exponentially. And it's going to cost us much more down the road to fix this issue than it would if we take some capital today and put it into additional maintenance. Where if we're going to compare this to a fleet vehicle, if we get into a situation to where we need another fleet vehicle and it's an emergency request, we can go to our contingency amount and we can fund that, and it comes up to us through IFC. Well, the sheriff is nodding his head no. It could. It could come out of contingency, but we have to start putting more money into maintaining our roads. Otherwise, we are creating an unfunded liability down the road that, I mean, I don't even know what the number will be, but it's a much bigger number than we're going to be able to pay.
Well, I agree. This is a great conversation. It's too bad it's happening on the day we got to vote on everything. That's the downside. And RTC and the funding for the streets has been in decline for years. And we've never had a discussion about it. It's never come forward, and throwing $300,000 onto it covers half the budget, but it's just fixing a pothole here or a pothole there. There is no long-term resolution to how to fix our streets, other than increase taxes or do something else of that nature. We did a one-in sales tax to do other things. We should look at our budget as to we reduce property taxes. Maybe we shouldn't have done that. Maybe we should have went for streets if possible. But the discussion needs to happen, but we're doing it on a day where we're going to say yay or nay to the budget. I just think it's, well, we should go back to horses, not cars. Maybe that would save the roads.
Well, I got you, and don't for the board, don't misunderstand my comments here, because I think that the dialogue we're having here is extremely valuable, and it's not that, one decision or the other is going to be better than one or the other's decision is going to be better. I think that, I just, for my own sense, I want to get a feel for what it means if we do this, and I'm working there. But I tell you what, why don't you tee up a motion, and we'll see where it goes, so we can see if it moves forward. You want to do that, Lori?
Oh, I'll give it a shot.
Go.
Let's see. Let's see if I can form one that works here. Okay. I move that $300,395 be provided to the street maintenance account. However, it cannot be expended unless the receipts, we'll get a report in August to verify that the money is there before it can be spent. How about I say it that way?
So basically what you're asking us to do is to earmark, maybe we can just earmark any additional
CTAX
over and above the amount that was actually estimated in fiscal 15
I could live
on
with
that
that
budget.
I could live with that.
To streets. So it could be 300,000, it could be 200, it could be
500.
Right.
I could live with that.
Right.
And then it's real, and it's the number that we know, we're not guessing.
I would ask the motion to be amended so that it can only be used specifically for street maintenance and repair purposes and no other use.
I'll take that amendment to the motion.
Then I second the motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, could we just have the motion repeated, please?
We'll get it for you.
So the motion is to apply any CTAX revenue that is received that exceeds that in the tentative budget to the street maintenance account specific to customer-driven repairs for potholes, et cetera.
And just for clarification, it would be the 2000, over and above
15.
the 2015 estimated number.
2015 CTAX number.
What is that?
Kathy, make sure Jim, hang on a minute. Let me just make sure that we've got, because these need to be kind of particular. Kathy, you okay with that motion? Or do you want it read again?
Supervisor Bagwell is moving to apply any 2015 C-tax revenue that is received that exceeds that in the tentative budget to the street maintenance account specific to customer-driven repairs. Is that correct? Yes. Thank you.
Actually, if you want to be more specific, the actual consolidated tax number that we're estimating for 2015 is $22,623,782. So it would be anything over that $22,623,782 number.
That's correct. That's what I show the budget number to be. That's correct.
We got the motion down? Discussion? Anybody? Hearing none, all,
Yes.
oh, go. I'm sorry, Jim, I didn't know what you're going.
I have a question. If the amount over this that will go to street maintenance will come out of being able to do, as the mayor was discussing earlier, other things on the other list, correct?
No, no.
I didn't ask you, Lori.
Well, I mean, you could use that money to do other things on this list if you wanted to, right? Or you could use it for operations. You could basically use it for anything you wanted as a board. So what Supervisor Bagwell is recommending is that any excess revenues be used for streets, any excess over and above the 2015 C-tax numbers that are estimated in this budget be used for streets. If you don't agree with that, you could use that money for any of these projects on this list. You could use it to hire 3 new policemen. I mean, it's one-shot money, so I don't recommend it. You use it for ongoing purposes, but
It's also for fleet purchases for the sheriff's department.
if you
It's
wanted to, sure.
for other things. So taking this money from this and putting it over here limits us to what we can purchase or buy off of that list, correct?
Yeah, there is the trade-off.
There is a trade-off. Then I need to hear from the sheriffs and the fire department before I make my vote, and any other department head that is on this list and needs something. I need the argument as to why we should vote yay or nay to this.
Right. Now, we're still recommending that we spend the $1,033,343. That'll still get spent, so that first page will still get spent, assuming you approve it. We're not recommending that any of those projects get pulled. It would just be some of the projects that weren't recommended to be funded, could be funded.
Correct, and that's what I need to hear.
Correct.
I need to hear why I should or should not vote in favor of this or against it. And if there's a good argument, then I understand that. But I think they should be given the opportunity to tell me how we best need to spend the money.
I mean, maybe just in lieu of timing, you could just decide to allocate any of that money for something, and then we could have another meeting, and you can, I mean, because we're not gonna know what this number is until August. So, I mean, if you wanted to have, right, I mean, I think that's an option, is just earmark that money for something. And so
Suppose you earmark it for ending fund balance.
We'll earmark it for
Is
ending
that,
fund
does that
balance.
protect it, if you earmark it for ending fund balance, you can take it out, but does that also protect it from negotiation issues?
Yeah, negotiation, we're not gonna exceed the 8 point.
Yeah, we're not gonna
Okay,
exceed
right.
that
So we'll
amount.
know what the number is. We don't have to decide today, you know,
Yeah, and
what we want to do with it. If there's issues, we could have another board meeting and,
I think,
and discuss
you
that.
know,
I mean, the number, to us, the number is important. I mean, actually, that number isn't really even important for this meeting, because we're talking about something in August, so.
okay, well, I've got a motion here. Hang on a second, Jim, and we'll see if we can solve
Well,
this.
I'm still discussing.
I got you,
Okay.
but we're.
Right, no
This
problem, I
board
understand.
discussion between us here, and what I'm gonna do is ask that, if, normally, on these discussion things here, we don't go back out to the staff, but in this situation, I think unless the board instructs me differently or suggests differently, I think Supervisor Shirk has a good point that, let's hear what they have to say on this thing here, so, I think.
Thank you.
Anybody have any problem with that?
No, I just have another question.
Another question?
Yes.
Okay, another question's in order.
Just a clarification before we put it out. Nick, you mentioned earlier that the interest savings on the bonds, is that how, on this list of capital needs, you are projecting that some of these other items are getting repaired in extended years?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna be using, I mean, we could talk about that 5-year plan too. I mean, what we're doing is we're bringing some of that interest savings forward and spending it, you know, in 2016. There isn't gonna be as much available in 2017 and 18 based on the projections that we do. Now, if the projections come in a little bit higher, there might be a little bit more capital. Originally, what I was planning on doing is taking 100,000 instead of the 775, and then in fiscal 17 and 18, there was going to be more capital available because of those interest rate savings. But we need to maintain the 5% fund balance in all those 5 years. So we were going to be using we were going to have more of a fund balance in 16 and then use that for operations in 17. So the city manager and I talked about it and decided that it would be better to recommend to you spending more money because we haven't spent money on capital in 7 or 8 years. It would be better to take that money and you know, the $775,000 and spend it this year. And then next year, there won't be as much available based on the projections. I think there's only going to be 75. There's going to be the 100 for the extraordinary maintenance, the whole 5 years. But in 17, we're only projecting about 75,000 in available capital. So that's because we're using it this year in 16, and we need to maintain that 5% fund balance throughout the 5-year projection. Now, if revenues come in better, then you can earmark those revenues in 16, the extra revenues for capital or streets or basically whatever you wanted to do. But I mean, I hope I answered your question. But I mean, it's all built into the pie. The new refunding bonds are built into the 5-year projection.
Well, let me ask the maker and the seconder of the motion, because I've got Chief Sheehan's here and I've got the sheriff giving me the stink eye. Do you want to vote on this now, or do you want to change that motion so that you could make this decision vis-a-vis streets in August? Or, because the motion's up there, and, you know, we'll hear from the chief if that's where you want to go today, and the sheriff, they want to speak. It's up to you guys.
Well, I will say what's important to me is that we have not had discussions. These capital lists, these road issues have never been discussed as public workshops and discussion with backup material, priorities. It's you, the staff, that have voted, discussed, done, and I appreciate all of your hard work. And you probably know the internal workings of the city far better to make some judgment calls, but we don't have any of that data. I have none of it. So all that I can use is the material that's provided to me to make that. So I think that maybe for future years, the capital portion should be done earlier as workshops. And we all have in here from the department heads, because frankly, even looking at the capital list of 1 through whatever that's being funded, I don't know if really in reality something that wasn't funded should be on that list, because I don't get your information. I don't hear from the sheriff. I don't hear from Mr. Shrehans. I don't hear from the assessor's office. So maybe the capital portion in the future needs to be what our workshops and discussions are about before we get to this process, like Mr. Shirk indicated. I'm supposed to vote today, but I don't have any rational means to make the decision. So I'm okay with taking this 300,000 discussion to an August meeting, or the first meeting in September, so that we have the August number, but recognize it's going to be staff coming up and discussing so that we get the feedback. I don't want it. It can be a recommendation from you guys, but I want the input, and I want the public to hear the input and to understand why we're making the decision.
Yeah, I think, you know, Lori, transparency is always the watchword of the day, and I'm reminded of the last time we did the capital project where we had to go down the line and even I think we split an ambulance or a fire truck. I mean, we were that close. I mean, we were right. There's a phrase, gnats something, but.
Yeah.
So I do believe that, the analysis on where the capital projects have gone has been pretty well vetted. At least it was, the last time we did this thing, which I think was last year. But, okay, so here's the deal. I don't want to, these are important discussions, and I don't want to, and Lori's done a heck of a lot of work here, but I don't want to short shrift that at all. So if you want to withdraw the motion and the second withdraws, then we will give the instruction that this issue of the $300,000 or whatever that number is will be brought back in August. Is that right? Huh? September.
As the seconder of the motion, what I would say is that because the motion as it stands does not affect the recommended IFC list of capital improvements for this year, it does not affect the transfer of the $775,000 or the $100,000. I would prefer that the motion stand as is. It doesn't affect anything really other than we're specifically designating those funds if they actually show up in the bank account, if they actually materialize, that we're designating those to repair and maintenance of the streets, which we have underfunded for years and is becoming an unfunded liability for the city. So I would prefer that the motion and the second stand.
Okay, Chief Freehans, you're at the table.
Yeah, Bob
doing?
Strands, Fire Chief, how you guys doing? Hey, one of the things is a little bit of the process, because this is actually one of the first budgets that I've had to go through, and I'm pretty good with numbers, so it's really not an issue. But we all follow the chain of command and how it works also. So the directors all got together. We all have, what, $700 million or $7 million worth of capital improvements we need? Okay, so then we all got together as a group and came up with priorities of where we should spend those funds, and that's where that was broken down. And one of them was like under $15,000 of priorities and over $15,000, okay? So we didn't know there was going to be, if you will, an extra $300,000 out there. Now, if you ask every director here, we all have our things that we need that if we knew about it, we would probably come to you and say, hey, with those funds that are there. I mean, obviously the roads are important. Obviously a fire truck's important to me, or a new ambulance. Obviously he needs patrol cars. So one of the issues where you said you didn't really have the information, I think we get the information that gets funneled from, I mean, we went to IFC, we did all that, and then it gets funneled through these two guys, and that's how the system's supposed to work. So I think it is working. We didn't know that those funds were actually going to be available. So if you're going to have your the meeting to be in September about those additional revenues, I can guarantee you I'll be here asking for some of it, because there is going to be a priority choice.
That's not the motion right now.
Oh, I know, but I'm just saying, I was just trying to say that. So if that's the case, then it's only on your motion for the roads and that kind of stuff. I would say there are some other priorities in the city, and thank you.
All right. Sheriff. Isn't it fun to have some money?
No, it's not fun to not have money.
It's a good problem to have.
I'll go back years and years and years ago. You and I and Mr. Warner sat back and had lunch together and talked about it. Infrastructure is probably the most in dire need of our funding. We've gone through an economic battle that has really destabilized a lot. And as I've spoken with Nick, the hole keeps getting deeper. And the problem with that hole getting deeper is you can't find your way out of it. Okay, at current levels, I think that if you brought all of those department heads up at this table at the same time and said, where should we tap a $300,000 notion, I don't know that there would be one consistent answer, but I do know this, that the easiest place to look at is where are the unfunded items at. I'm not even going to speak to cop cars. Across the city, our infrastructure is failing, and it's because of lack of funding. To add funding into an existing revenue source really robs from those that are in dire need of failing at this point in time.
All right, Snake Eye, thanks. Okay, all right.
For the record, Roger Mullendorf, Parks and Recreation Director. I want to make the point that the list that you have for CIPs, that represents years of deferred maintenance on a lot of different projects. And I'm not here to tell you that roads are not important. Obviously, they're very important. You know that. But there are a lot of items on that list that really don't come to the public's, I guess, attention that need to be taken care of. And so I guess I would really recommend that if we're going to take another look at the $300,000 that we go back and address the items that are on that list and see how that compares with the street maintenance needs that we have. So it's very important that, as the sheriff said, our infrastructure is failing because of deferred maintenance, and we need to address it as soon as possible.
Okay, all right. Jim, did you have anybody else you wanted to hear from?
I didn't ask for anybody. I just said if they wanted to talk, they could come forward. So I didn't call on anybody.
No. Okay, anybody else want to talk on this one? Public want to weigh in on this one? Anybody? All right, we ready to vote on this issue? Supervisor Shirk, you got your light on? We ready? We're going to take a vote? I'm sorry, can you hear me okay back there? Go.
So the motion that we have now, I'd like to hear the motion one more time, please.
Kathy, reread it, please.
Supervisor Bagwell moved to apply any 2015 C-tax revenue that is received that it exceeds $22,623,782 in the tentative budget to the street maintenance account specific to customer-driven repairs.
Okay, and then that would involve the total budget package together, Nick? No, just the C-tax.
No, that doesn't have anything to do with this budget that we're talking about now. That's a totally separate item.
Okay, I just want to be sure that that's not approval of the budgets in any shape or form, correct?
Right.
All right. Yeah. Well, I would caution this board, this vote, taking that funding, I think it's a good idea to take the funding, put it aside, but not designate it for anything until it comes back to the board and we can have a discussion about it. I think setting it aside for the street sounds great, but we've been under the assumption for years that the streets has no money and no one has done anything of having a discussion of how to improve the streets. There's never been one since I've been sitting on this board, how to improve the roads, how to get more money, and what we can do. But now all of a sudden, we're going to take $300,000 because we can't do anything, and we say, well, here, we'll fix it with this Band-Aid. It does nothing. It improves it a little bit, but all we're doing is just passing the buck down the road, kicking the can, however you want to put it. We're not solving anything. If you want to amend your motion to say, hey, we'll have a discussion and we'll figure out how to fix these roads, I'll vote in favor of it. But this motion, I'm not in favor of this, and I will not vote in favor of it.
Okay. All right, the motion's up. You ready to vote, folks? Ready? All in favor, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Nay. Okay, so it's 3-2 pass.
Me and you?
How about that? How about that? How about that?
So can we get back on the discussion about the actual budget now? Because
well, I think, we can get back on the, but we need to get these things resolved. I mean, because this affects the budget. So just, Lori, you know what, it's noon. How many more items what's the?
Well, we haven't really made any motions on the actual fiscal 16.
Well, we haven't because I'm getting there.
Right, okay.
I haven't forgotten that, but I think that there are some subset motions that Supervisor Bagwell has. I think we need to cross before you could say, okay, we're going to vote this budget in or not. So that's what we're trying to do here. So
You're going to have to take a 10-minute break.
we can't do that, Jim.
Well, then, I'll be
Okay,
right back.
I'm sorry, I'm kidding you. All right, 10-minute
Go to
break.
the bathroom.
Yeah, I got you, just kidding. Bagwell to make a motion on a subset of the budget and see where that goes, and then we're going to take a break and come back at 1:30. So Supervisor Bagwell.
Okay, I need glasses to read the little document that was respected. So we were talking, this is just the general fund to see if we can finish that up. The alternative sentencing drug fees that we all approved as the board at a previous meeting had $20,000 on it, and Nick Providenti wasn't quite comfortable going to $20,000, so the discussion is that we should only budget 10 to be conservative. Then in the public safety complex, he agreed with the analysis that $20,000 could be taken from that, from the overstating in utilities. In the new city hall budget, which is the old city hall now or whatever, that was a good joke. I had identified about 7,000, but again, he said only 6 was there right now. So for conservative sakes, I'm recommending 4,000. I'm with Nick, I'm a little conservative person here. In the planning, I would like to take $5,000 out because I did look at fiscal year 13 and 14 and took out the building rent. And so I'm sure that 5,000 is still available to be moved. In the business license thing, you agreed that the 5,000 could be taken out. In the juvenile detention budget, you concurred that the heating was overstated, so we can take 10,000 from that. The one discussion item I think all the board might want to talk about, but I'm going to recommend that the Epic rides be funded from our redevelopment budget instead of the general fund, because we had a sign that was in there that we're not doing now at Fuji Park. And then in the swimming pool, I had originally stated 5,000, and Nick thought that would be a little bit tight, so we reduced that to 2,500. And then in the recreation budget, the Parks Department has gone to using Carson Now, which is wonderful. They're doing a great job for advertising what's happening and what's going on. So only cut that 5,000. And so I will be happy to read those amounts and then give this actually to
Well, I think
Kathy
give
and
that,
up for
give the
discussion.
sheet to Kathy, and anybody want to second that?
Is that a motion?
That's a motion.
I'll second it.
Good, all right. Discussion on all this. Anybody? Everybody understand? You're going to give that to her? Jim? Anybody? Okay.
Just for clarification purposes, you want us to actually change the fiscal 16 budget by these amounts? Correct. Okay, do you want to say anything about NNDA, or did you already say?
I did that earlier, and we talked about the GIS, and you were going to come back later with the GIS, so the 75,000 was an already add.
Right, okay, and then the GIS will just basically be, it'll be an augmentation if we need to later. Okay.
All right.
So do you want us to, you just want us to reduce these amounts? Do you want us to appropriate anything else, anywhere else, or you just want us to reduce these amounts?
Just
let it fall
reduce
into
them and
fund
they'll
balance?
drop into the ending fund balance.
Okay.
The only other thing that I would like to add, which I see as being a need, and it's for discussion or consideration, but the fact that a grants manager has been a position that has not been filled since Heidi was hired away. And it's a void that does need to be filled, because I do firmly believe that there's monies out there that we are not accessing because department heads are just too busy to deal with that. And there's deadlines that we miss because, you know, it's hard to track all of these grants that we are getting. So that's something that I would like to see under consideration in terms of our budgeting.
Okay, well, you read a great list, except I don't have that paperwork. I have it online, but I can't read it. Nick sent an email with it, and it wasn't, as far as I know, it wasn't in my basket, submitted as late material, a hard copy. So I don't have access to it where I can read it. Well, why wasn't it submitted as late material, hard copy? I think my first question is, why wasn't it submitted as late material, hard copy, paper?
Well, let me just try and answer just a little bit. I mean, technically, it's not late material because it's one supervisor's suggested changes, and so that stuff routinely comes up at the board meeting, at our meeting, rather than doing it. I thought everybody had a copy of this that sent around, that Nick sent around to everybody, but
This was sent out in email Wednesday at 10:42.
Right.
I can't read it online.
Okay.
So I'm asking, why wasn't it submitted as late material or hard copy here?
Well, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, Supervisor Bagwell, but I think, that, you know, where we are is on these things, they come up during the board meeting. I'm not certain for Supervisor Shirk that this really is late material. This is discussions that a board member intends to bring up at the board. And so it's not really an exhibit for late material, but I may, you know, Supervisor, or Nick, you gonna weigh in on that? What do you want?
Yeah, I mean, I meet with every board member prior to the meeting. We get questions, either I'll answer them on the spot, I'll farm it out to staff, and we'll provide answers back to the questions. I mean, if every one of those answers is going to be late material, I'm going to have to stop meeting with board members prior to the meeting. I mean, it's going to be unwieldy.
This was in an email. This isn't questions and answers in person. This was an email
No, this
sent out.
was the result of a meeting in person.
However you want to put it, it's in an email sent out to all board members. It should have been submitted as late material because it was given to all board members. That's my opinion. If it's not, if that's the rules for late material, okay, I got it. So I'll go back there and get the late material that I can read.
All right, then what
Okay.
we're gonna do is, we're gonna be in recess until 1:30, and we'll take up this motion then, and people can have a chance to look at that schedule between now and 1:30. All right, we're in recess until 1:30.